of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. The prayer this morning will be offered by the good gentleman representing the Eastern Shore. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning, colleagues. Please join me in prayer. As we journey through this day, guide our steps, O Lord. Illuminate our minds with your truth and wisdom, that we may discern the path you have set before us. Grant us clarity of thought and purpose as we make decisions, both big and small, so that our choices align with your will and bring about good fruit in our lives and the lives of those around us. Amen.
Amen. Quorum call.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. There being 127 members present, the House is now in session. To order petitions, memorials, and other papers. We're going to start our session today by recognizing the awardees of the 2024 Speaker Society. This is our 29th anniversary. We will begin with the Speaker's Medallion Award. This award is presented to a Maryland citizen who has made outstanding contributions to the state. This award goes to a Baltimore native whose career in public service spans 38 years. As a member of the Congressional House Intelligence Committee, this statesman was among the first lawmakers to address the issue of cybersecurity and has championed policies to counter threats abroad. A steadfast advocate for our nation's veterans, he created Operation Hero Miles to allow Americans to donate their frequent flyer miles to wounded warriors recovering at military or VA medical centers, as well as to friends and families visiting them. Under his leadership, billions of federal dollars have been allocated to the National Security Agency, Fort Meade, U.S. Cyber Command, Aberdeen Proving Ground, and other installations essential to the country's national security. A consummate champion for Baltimore County, he has served on the Baltimore County Council and as my former boss as Baltimore County Executive before becoming a member of the United States House of Representatives. I'm pleased to present the Speaker's Medallion Award to Congressman Charles Albert Dutch Ruppersberger III.
Hello, Maryland House of Delegates. Thank you for the claps. One thing I've known, I told my wife when I went to Congress that I was only going to stay 10 years, and it's been 22. And she just finally has had it. She said, you have got to retire. So that's, since I've retired, I've been getting more accolades. So you're all elected officials. It's not bad. I mean, everybody loves you now because they know you're... Did you hear what I said? No? I repeated. Okay. That's smart. Thank you for reminding me. First thing, my wife, Kay, who I've been married to a long time, I committed to her after I ran for Congress that I'd stay 10 years. And it's been 22 years. And she really put her foot down. So that's why I'm really retiring. I mean, I could go on forever. But, you know, you have to realize when you get old and gray and wrinkled in the face, sometimes, you know, you should listen to your family. My political career has been focused on local, federal, and state levels. I, by the way, always wanted to be a state senator. My life was saved in Maryland shock trauma when I was a prosecutor. I was in shock trauma for about a month. And when I got out, I wasn't supposed to live, but the Lord wouldn't have me, the devil wouldn't take me. And Dr. Cowley said, Dutch, we need all the help we can get. We want you to run for office. So I had a 2-year-old son. I was 28 years old, and I lost my first election. How many people here have lost their first election? Well, then, hi, welcome to the club, because you're here now. Anyhow, and then I ended up running with Senator Frank Kelly. I ran against him once, and then I lost to him. I ran his campaign the next time, and then he became a member of the state senate here. And I always wanted to be a state senator. I never got here. So this is a big deal for me here today, and to be honored by you. I've known AJ now for over 30 years. 30 years. Ooh. She was my colleague in Baltimore County and led our diversity efforts. This was 3 decades ago. Talk about a trailblazer, that's Adrian. So I'm proud of AJ and everything she has done and accomplished and will continue to achieve for the citizens of Maryland. Now, who would have thought that I was a lifeguard in Ocean City, Maryland, on the beach patrol at age 15. I mean, that's pretty young. I wouldn't want any 15-year-old saving me. But, and you know, I went to University of Maryland, played lacrosse. That was my major, by the way. But I'm really so proud, after all the things that I've done in my life, to receive this medallion award after nearly 4 decades in public office. And it's been an honor to represent the people of Maryland. It really has been. People often stop me at restaurants, the grocery store, to thank me, and a lot since I said I was going to retire, I said, for my service. And the best stories aren't about bills passed. You know, I do national security, intelligence, and Russia, China, that type of thing. But it's about people. And I think if you look at what you're doing now, it's about helping people and making a difference with people. A veteran who got over his overdue benefits, things of that nature, passports, it goes on and on. A small business owner who has problems. And you do the same thing, and you know what it is. And I can't begin to tell you what these conversations with your constituents mean to me, and I'm sure mean to you. I consider myself incredibly lucky that the citizens of my district have trusted me for so many years to represent them in the world's greatest democracy, and it is. I've never taken that trust lightly, and I feel very strongly that we deserve to represent the people that have elected us and have confidence in us. And I want to thank the many people in this room who've helped me along the way. It has been a highlight of my career to get to know and work with many of you over the years. The decision to retire now has been extremely difficult for me, and believe me, it is. When you've done something this long, it's tough. But family calls, and made possible only by knowing that there are others that are going to take the job like you all and make a difference. You have to move on, and really feel really good that the federal, state, and local elected officials in the state of Maryland are doing a great job. So thank you for that. Now, there's a lot more to get done over the next 9 months. We've got 9 months to go. I look forward to collaborating with some of you again. And thank you for this award. I cherish it. Adrian, thank you for nominating me for this award. Take care. Whoa. Okay. Oh, you're going to, okay.
Yes, it is. The Speaker of the Speaker of the Maryland House of Delegates, Speaker's medallion, which he is holding now. Turn it around. Let him see it. Okay. Banner. Presented to Congressman C.A. Dutch Ruppersberger in recognition of his distinguished service to the people of Maryland. This award and accompanying medallion incorporate the mace of the House of Delegates, the symbol of its independence and its authority as the House strives to reflect the will of the people and to provide for the good of the state. It's given it to Congressman C.A. Dutch Ruppersberger for his representation of Maryland in Congress and for his commitment to a better life for all Marylanders. Signed by yours truly, me.
All right, here, let me, oh, okay. Oh, wait. Picture. See, I'm getting. Thank you. Great. I'm honored. Thanks for remembering.
Dutch. Sit, sit down, please. Moving on to the Thomas Kennedy Award. This award is presented to a former member of the House of Delegates for personal courage and dedication to the principles of liberty and freedom. This award goes to another longtime public servant who has served as a member of this body and as a county executive. As a high school student, his life was changed by the words of Richard Wright, who opened his eyes to the struggles others face and started him on his path to public service. As county executive, he established the Prince George's County Economic Development Incentive Fund after the Great Recession, creating an unprecedented $50 million fund to stimulate business growth in the county. He enhanced the county's healthcare system by establishing a new healthcare facility, the University of Maryland Capital Region Medical Center, and he laid the groundwork for the relocation of the FBI headquarters to Greenbelt, Maryland. All the while, he has continued his fearless fight for awareness and cutting-edge research on Alzheimer's disease and for more support services for families and caregivers. I am pleased to present this year's Thomas Kennedy Award to former delegate and Prince George's County Executive, Rashern L. Baker. So you know where to set up top. So, awarded to Rashern L. Baker in recognition of his distinguished service to the people of Maryland and Maryland House of Delegates. This award and accompanying medallion incorporate the mace of the House of Delegates, the symbol of its independence and its authority as the House strives to reflect the will of the people and to provide for the good of the state. Rashern L. Baker is a distinguished public career pursued pursued those two goals with an unexcelled passion and an inspiring results. He is a noble successor to Thomas Kennedy, who was around here 1776 to 1832, a delegate of unshakable conviction and determined public service in whose memory this award is given. Presented by yours truly. There you go.
Oh, wow. Okay, this is nice. I wish my mommy was here. I want to thank the speaker and the members here. Folks who know me know that I said that this was my favorite job I ever had for a couple of reasons. One is, as the speaker said in her introduction, I read this book, Black Boy by Richard Wright, and it changed my life. It took a 17-year-old with no direction who had been kicked out of many schools, and it made me feel guilty. And sometimes guilt is not a bad thing. It made me feel guilty because I had been born to parents who always were there to undergird me. And when I realized that others didn't have that, I wanted to change something. I wanted to be a part of it. And that book led me down that road. But it was my dad who talked me into politics because I was complaining about a local elected official, how nothing changed, that guy didn't do anything. Y'all have never heard this, right? And I decided then and there, he said, if you think you can do better, then you run. And as any 17-year-old to their dad says, that's exactly what I'll do. I'll show you. This body allowed me to bring my father here in the last year of his life to see his then 35-year-old son be sworn in as a member of this body. That memory has stayed with me to say, our time here in these positions that you're given, it is our obligation and our duty to do all we can to make sure that those who aren't watching us are taken care of. Thank you, and I appreciate this. I should say this, my first child is up here in the gallery. My daughters are not here with me. And I would be remiss if I didn't say this, that my wife and I, my late wife and I, started our adult life right here in this chamber. So thank you for that. God bless you.
Our final award is the Casper R. Taylor Jr. Founders Award. This is presented to a sitting member of the House of Delegates for steadfast commitments to public service and the integrity of the House of Delegates. This delegate has been a courageous and big-hearted champion of the law, justice, and equality for each and every Marylander. Throughout his legislative career, he has spearheaded landmark reforms to provide Maryland workers with the ability to earn sick leave, to help more Marylanders choose solar energy, and to give all Marylanders the right to marry who they love. Born and raised in Baltimore's Reservoir Hill neighborhood, this delegate started his political career at age 7. Volunteering on Mary Pat Clark's campaign for Baltimore City Council. As the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, he has led the charge for more transparency and accountability for police officers, closed loopholes for buying shotguns and rifles, passed legislation requiring every police department to use body cameras, and increase protections for victims of sexual abuse. I'm pleased to present Delegate Luke Clippinger with this year's Casper R. Taylor Founders Award.
Patrick's here.
He has the Casper R. Taylor Jr. Founders Award. Luke H. Clippinger. As a member of the Maryland House of Delegates, you have shown steadfast commitment to public service and the integrity of this great institution. You embody the concept of One Maryland: integrity, commitment, leadership, tradition, and presented today on this Speaker Society 2024 by yours truly. Thank you.
I'm fine. Thank you. Wow. First of all, I want to thank the reason that I'm able to be here and the reason that all of us have behind us every single day, the people who are very, very he's the love of my life, and he makes it possible for me to be here and torment all of you. And so I hope that you'll all remember those people in our lives who help us to be able to be here to serve the people of the state of Maryland, because it's so important, the work that they do that help us to be here. I want to thank all of you for this. I was working on birthday cards, and then this started to happen, and I don't know what to do. But it's an honor to serve the people of the 46th District with my colleagues in the 46th District. And it's an honor to chair the House Judiciary Committee and work with so many good and wonderful people and others. So it's so good to work with all of you and as we do the work for the people of our districts and for the people of the state. So thank you all very, very much for this. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Special order calendar number 50. Recognizing the chair. Oh yeah, I was trying to rush things, sorry. Kirk will take. Go ahead.
Senate Bill 360, Budget Bill, Fiscal Year 2025. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the chairman of the Appropriations Committee.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, today we will introduce 38 amendments to our state budget. As I mentioned on Monday, this budget is balanced. But as I also mentioned, the budget contains red flags ahead. While this budget is balanced, we are facing significant cuts to our transportation system now and significant budget shortfalls in the coming years. And I applaud this body and our governor for making growing our economy a priority. I believe together we can do that and truly make this Maryland's decade. But we also have to recognize a little bit of why businesses would want to relocate to the state of Maryland. What makes us exceptional? What sets us apart? I believe what sets us apart are the investments that you all have made, that this body has made in our state. I think that when businesses look will they move to Maryland or will they move to states like Alabama? They will look at our great institutions. That means our second to none higher education system in this state. Investments that you all have made to make that an economic engine for our state. That means a thriving transportation system for our state. A transportation system that moves Marylanders from work to home and back safely and swiftly. A transportation system that provides transit that is safe and reliable for our citizens. It means a robust healthcare system supported by the work of the Health and Government Operations Committee over the years. We have a great healthcare system in the state and some of the best hospitals in the entire world. These things don't happen by accident. They are because of the investments that this body has made. It means cleaning our bay, another huge economic engine for our state, reserving money for program open space, and making sure we prioritize those values as well. And yes, it means striving toward a world-class education system. Okay, but these things do not happen by accident. They require investment. And I stand here for the proposition that businesses do not move to a state that does not invest in itself. Businesses do not invest in a state that fails to invest in itself. And so that's why I'm so proud of this budget, because I believe that it recognizes this proposition for today and for tomorrow, for now and into the future. A few things this budget does, just to highlight and remind everyone before we get into the amendments. The budget before you invests in our children and their futures by fully funding public education and child care. This budget subsidizes our state transportation system to make sure it can continue to thrive. This budget supports disadvantaged individuals in need of health care, mental health, and housing services. This budget increases efforts to rebuild state government, enhances funding for public safety in record numbers, and maintains support for victim services. And this budget invests in climate solutions now. Madam Speaker, I will now introduce the amendments in groups. After describing the amendments, I will move to each group to be adopted. If any member has concerns about a specific amendment, please ask to have that amendment separated for debate. As in the past, I ask members to hold additional amendments to the budget until after the committee amendments have been adopted and considered. With your permission, Madam Speaker, let me turn to the first group of amendments.
Permission granted.
Amendments 1 through 6 pertain to the Governor's Office for Children, the Interagency Commission on School Construction, the Department of Planning, the West North Avenue Development Authority, and the State Department of Assessment and Taxation. In the Governor's Office for Children, Amendment number 1 reduces funds and modifies language as a technical amendment. In the Interagency Commission on School Construction, Amendment 2 strikes language expressing intent. In the Department of Planning, Amendment 3 strikes language that restricts funds pending a report, and Amendment 4 deletes funding. In the West North Avenue Development Authority, Amendment 5 reduces funding. In the State Department of Assessment and Taxation, Amendment 6 modifies language restricting funds pending submission of a report to expand required information. Move the adoption of Amendments 1 through 6.
Question for the House is the adoption of amendments 1 through 6. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The amendments have been adopted. Next.
Madam Speaker, Amendments 7 through 10 pertain to the Department of Budget and Management, the Department of Service and Civic Innovation, the Department of Transportation, and the Department of Natural Resources. In the Department of Budget and Management, Amendment 7 adds language restricting funds pending submission of a report. In the Department of Service and Civic Innovation, Amendment 8 reduces general funds. In the Department of Transportation, Amendment 9 adds language restricting funds pending a report. In the Department of Natural Resources, Amendment 10 adds language restricting funds pending a report. Move the adoption of Amendments 7 through 10.
Question for the House is the adoption of amendments 7 through 10. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The amendments have been adopted.
Madam Speaker, Amendments 11 through 19 pertain to the Maryland Department of Health and Department of Human Services. The Maryland Department of Health, Amendment 11, further reduces general funds and makes a technical amendment to release language in The Prevention and Health Promotion Administration Amendment 12 modifies language to alter reporting requirements. And the Behavioral Health Administration Amendment 13 modifies language to increase amount restricted. And the Community Health Resources Commission Amendment 14 strikes language expressing intent. And Amendment 15 reduces special funds. The Department of Human Services Amendment 16 modifies language to increase the amount of funds restricted pending a report. Amendments 17 and 19 modify language and reduce amount to be transferred to another program, and Amendment 18 deletes funds. Move the adoption of Amendments 11 through 19.
Question for the House is the adoption of amendments 11 through 19. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The amendments have been adopted.
Amendments 20 through 29 pertain to the Department of Labor, the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, the Maryland State Department of Education, and the Department of Higher Education Commission. In the Department of Labor, Amendment 20 reduces general funds for workforce innovations. In the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, Amendment 21 modifies language restricting funds pending a report. In the Maryland State Department of Education, Amendment 22 strikes language restricting funds pending a report. And Amendment 23 strikes language restricting funds pending a memorandum of understanding. In the Maryland Higher Education Commission, Amendment 24 strikes language restricting funds pending a report. And Amendments 25 through 27 those amendments restrict funds pending reports, and Amendments 28 and 29 further reduce funds for the Salinger formula and modify language to restrict the allocation of remaining funds in the program. Move adoption of Amendments 20 through 29.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments 20 through 29. All in favor signify by saying aye. The amendments have been adopted. Next amendment.
Amendments 30 through 33 pertain to the Department of Commerce, the Department of Environment, and the Department of State Police. The Department of Commerce, Amendment 30 modifies language in the Preservation of Cultural Arts program. The Department of Environment, Amendment 31 adds language to restrict funds pending a report. And the Department of State Police, Amendments 32 and 33 reduce general funds. Move the adoption of Amendments 30 through 33.
Question for the House is the adoption of amendments 30 through 33. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Amendments have been adopted.
Finally, Amendments 34 through 38 pertain to the back of the bill sections. Amendment 34 reduces fiscal 24 funding for various purposes, and Amendment 35 adds fiscal 24 funds for specific cybersecurity use. Amendment 36 adds funds for fiscal 25 for various programs. Amendment 37 adds language restricting funds pending submission of report, and Amendment 38 is technical. Move the adoptions of Amendment 34 through 38.
Recognizing Gentlelady from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would ask that Amendment 36 be separated out.
Okay. Question for the House is to adopt amendments 34 through 35. All in favor signify by saying aye. Amendments have been adopted. Gentlelady from Baltimore County had it wrong.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's been a year or so since we've had the budget debate. So, I would like to have a separate vote on House Bill on Amendment 36, and Madam Speaker, would now be the time to do that? Or is it on third reader?
Yeah, you can do it now.
Right now? Okay. I would ask the body to turn to Amendment 36. This amendment starts on page 278 of the budget, and it goes to page 300. And I would contest that there are some good programs in this amendment number 36. But it looks like it's been turned into a $200,000 slush fund for pet projects and actually favored private businesses. And today, when we have such a tough budget environment and there are taxes to the tune of $1.3 billion that are being considered, I think it's time for us to be fiscally prudent and socially responsible and not make these kind of allocations. So I would point you to some that I'm specifically talking about. And one thing I would mention in the beginning, there are a lot of projects in this $239 million amendment that go to our universities. And we fund our universities pretty well, and I don't understand why they can't fund these programs within the generous budget that we give them. We also have a neighborhood revitalization item in the budget, and I think it's $51.3 million. And there are another maybe $11 million worth of programs specially earmarked within Budget Amendment 36. And some of the things I'd like to point out on page 281, lines 31 to 32, there's $140,000 for rent, furniture, and equipment costs associated with office space for Blueprint. We are spending billions on Blueprint. I don't know why they can't find $140,000 within their budget for office furniture. There's $1 million for the Cal Ripken Senior Foundation. We all love Cal Ripken. But in today's environment, should we be giving them $1 million? There's $1 million for the Arundel Lodge. There's $1 million for the Baltimore Jewish Council, which I'm very fond of, but I'm not sure in today's environment we should be giving money out. $750,000 for North Bay, which is great. It's an environmental and educational facility that should be getting money from the education budget. There's $750,000 for the Nancy Grasmick Public School Professional Award. There's $750,000 for, this is interesting, on page 284, there's $750,000 for the purpose of continuing critical pandemic recovery work. I didn't know we were still dealing with critical pandemic recovery work, and there's certainly plenty of that federal money out there that has yet to be spent. I don't think we need another $750,000 in that. There's $550,000 to support small and mid-sized nonprofits and strengthening artistic, cultural, and educational opportunities, while this very budget cut $1.5 million out of a small business program. The Division of Labor has 9 new inspectors. I don't know why that's not in the labor budget. There's $500,000 for Maryland Public Broadcasting Commission for Center for Maryland History Films. I love history. I love those films, but today we should be tightening our belt. There's $500,000 for Vehicles for Change, which I think is a great program, but I'm not sure it should be funded at that level. There's $500,000 for the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. There is $400,000 for the Hippodrome. I love the Hippodrome. I've been many times, but again, should we be asking taxpayers to pay for this? There's $250,000 for the Messenet project. $250,000. Apparently, we're going to be hosting a Council of State Governments conference, so that might be good news. But today, I don't know if that's what we should be spending our money on. $200,000 for the Baltimore Animal Rescue and Care Shelter. $200,000 for the Chesapeake Shakespeare Company. $175,000. I thought this was interesting. The Baltimore Arts Realty Corporation for their Smart Garments initiative. I hope those garments are smart for $175,000. There is $100,000 for something called the Yelena Leadership Foundation. This one I found quite interesting, and I hope somebody will stand up and explain to us why we're giving $75,000 on page 294 to the Lighthouse Bistro. Now, I might like their food, and they might be doing some good things, but to have $75,000 in our budget to a private bistro, I'm not sure today that's a good idea. There's $50,000 for the Baltimore Rowing Community. And finally, I will note there's $10,000 in here for the Build Haiti Foundation. And I do feel very terrible, as we all do, about what's going on in Haiti. But this is not someone's personal checkbook. I'm happy to donate money to Haiti out of my own checkbook, but I don't think now is the time for Maryland tax dollars to go to some program called Build Haiti Foundation. So with that, I would ask the body to vote no on Amendment 36. Again, there are many good programs in there, but now is not the time to spend like it's somebody else's money.
Committee Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thank the gentlelady for reading us largely Senate additions to the budget. I think that's helpful. I do think it's helpful to have some context. The blueprint money that the gentlelady spoke about actually comes from the blueprint fund. So I know you were on the budget committee and we all get a little rusty, but that did actually come from the blueprint fund. So I think that should assure your worries a little bit. The lighthouse project you mentioned, again, that was a Senate ad, but that's part of our workforce initiative to retrain and get people back into the workforce, in this instance for culinary ads. I do think it's important to know that this House should be aware that our ads are a bit more constrained than the Senate ads, but I would hope that the Senate would support our ads as we support theirs. I do also think it's important to point out that any ads to the budget have to have a corresponding cut, right? The Senate, to add things to the budget, had to find money to do that. They had to find savings within the budget, just as the House did. And some of the House ads that I'm particularly proud of, so this is a great opportunity you've given me to talk about how proud I am of this budget and some of our ads, include emergency rental assistance. I think that we know that there's a crisis in housing, and the House added $5 million for emergency rental assistance. So I'd ask you to support that ad. Local management boards. We know that the governor has made war on child poverty a priority, and the House added $5 million for local management boards. Violence intervention is a House ad. We could sit here and name ads all day. The fact of the matter is the Senate has done their work. They found money for their priorities. We're going to support that. The House has done our work. We found money for our priorities, and we think those priorities are very streamlined and go to the things that are most pressing for our community. So with that, I'd ask you to support the committee amendment.
Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady from Baltimore County.
Thank you, and thank you, Appropriations Committee. I was on that committee for 4 years, and I appreciate how hard you work. My comments are not to disparage your work, because you are maybe the second hardest working committee next to HGO. But I would ask you a question, Mr. Floor Leader. In the House Appropriations Committee report that we had, it says the Senate appropriations for their additions, I won't call them a slush fund, the Senate put $219.4 million and the House committee put $236.9 million. So it sounds like you put more than them, although you told me you didn't.
Committee Chair.
Absolutely did not. We actually, you have to look at cuts concurrent with ads. For example, we found savings in the consortium, which we were then able to add back into the blueprint. That's a big one. One of the big ads that the House did was putting $140 million back in the blueprint. We found that by savings within the blueprint. So, this is like a cut and an ad. It's a zero-sum gain. So if you look at just our pure ads, actually our ads were significantly less than the Senate. If you look at just these projects, if you look at just those, and I think we will have some additional money that we can then spend on what the House thought was more prudent right now, which is one-time ads in our capital budget, one-time spending in the capital budget.
Okay, thank you for that answer, and I still encourage a red vote on this amendment.
Amendment number 36. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Oppose? No. Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
On the amendment 36. Clerk will take the call. Amendment fails. Passes. I'm sorry, amendment passes. I'm so used to saying. The amendment passes. Huh? Commit. Huh? I'm sorry.
Was that the last one? Yep. That was the last amendment, Madam Speaker.
Okay. No.
Oh, I think we still, amendments 37 through 38. My
Yeah.
apologies.
Question for the House is the adoption of amendments 37 and 38. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? I think the ayes have it. Amendments have been adopted. Yes.
I have an additional
Minority
amendment at the
Leader.
desk, Madam Speaker, if that's the conclusion of the committee amendments.
Okay, okay,
Adopt the report.
okay, all right. This, question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Now, Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk, 633222/1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We just went through a discussion. Budgets are interesting things. There are literally thousands of things in them. I generally vote for budgets. I look at them as cakes almost. They have a lot of different ingredients to them. I may not enjoy all of the ingredients. I may not want to eat some of the ingredients by themselves, but when all baked together, they make a product that I may want to live with, I may want to partake of. We just heard a conversation and a discussion about particularized items within the budget. There are probably things that all of us, if we made the budget ourselves, we would have 141 different budgets because everyone has a slightly different take on where money could or should be spent. The amendment that will be before the chamber today, this amendment, the first amendment in a series that will be offered, relates to a $500,000 budget item of increased funding for the Maryland Office of the Public Defender. What the amendment would do would be to take that $500,000, and when all of you think how difficult it is, well, maybe not as difficult for some as others, but for many of us of both parties, it's very difficult to secure a $500,000 expenditure that you would like, that you would need, that you believe is correct through the budget process. It's not an insignificant amount of money. And what the amendment would do is redivert those funds from the Office of the Public Defender as a budgetary add-on for them and redivert them to the Blueprint Fund. So I want everyone to take note of that this is the minority leader advocating for more money being transferred to the Blueprint Fund, which we consistently hear needs more money by any means necessary. The Office of the Public Defender is certainly a worthy and a constitutionally necessary state agency. There is an obligation under constitutional law to provide legal counsel to the truly indigent. One interesting thing that many here may not know, though, is that our standards for indigent individuals have changed so much that, in fact, we provide free legal counsel to criminal defendants who may have much more significant incomes or assets than neighboring states like Virginia or Pennsylvania. Their standards for indigency and when you will provide a free attorney are significantly lower than ours, because individuals who have the ability, I can tell you this, there's a lot of attorneys out there in the world, probably too many of us. There's an awful lot. It is not terribly hard to find an attorney to handle a wide variety of criminal and civil cases. You do have to pay for them. But what we have done, and I think this is what contributes to what I'm sure many of you hear from the Office of Public Defender, we're overwhelmed. We're overburdened. We have too many cases. We have too many dockets. Because I think we have extended their mandate to representing people who work, people who have assets, people who in many communities would be classified as middle class, and they can now go and get a free attorney. Human beings will, by nature, seek to better themselves and seek to get the best deal that they can. Most of us. Most people will do that. If you said to someone, listen, you've been charged with second-degree assault, You have a job, you have some resources, you could go out and hire an attorney, but that attorney might cost $1,500. They might cost $2,500. They might cost $3,500. Highly unlikely that you're going to go to trial in the state of Maryland over a second-degree assault charge. You're probably going to resolve a plea bargain, largely at the district court level, in most cases, not every, but most cases. But you'll have to pay for the attorney to do that. On the other hand, you make $50,000, $60,000 a year, 45, whatever it may be, you can just sign up for the public defender's office and they'll take care of it for you for free. But it's not free. It's paid for by the taxpayers. It's paid for by this budget. And so while I have a great deal of appreciation, I had a very, very close friend. I owned a business with him who was a member of the public defender's office in Allegheny County, passed away about 12 years ago, tragically. He was one of the best people I've ever known. He was a good person, and he did his level best to fulfill his constitutional responsibility. So I have no bone to pick, so to speak, with the concept of the public defender's office. But I do think that we have extended their mandate, and they constantly need more, and that we could, in this budget, save $500,000 for the children and for the Blueprint Fund by reallocating our priorities and responsibilities. Subject to further debate, would move the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, thank you. First, I want to thank our minority leader for being interested in the blueprint, but others will speak on that. And I will start off to say, listen, anyone who's really interested in knowing how someone qualifies for the Office of the Public Defender, I'll tell you, go to the Criminal Code Procedure 16-210, which says that this person's income and assets have to be less than 100% of the federal poverty guidelines, which is in the state of Maryland, means they have to make less than 25 grand, okay? So that is a separate point. This amount of money that we're talking about right now is going for particularly salary increases for our Office of the Public Defender, who have insane caseloads. That's not my opinion, that's DLS, like nonpartisan analysis. And we are losing our public defenders to the state's attorney's offices, to the attorney general's office, because right now, on average, they make 20 grand less, right, than their counterparts that they're standing across from. Now, I just want you to think, if you or your loved one is indigent and needs quality representation, these folks have high caseloads, and we're not paying them comparable to other public servants. That's not going to be a good service to the public. Okay, and ultimately at the end of the day, the reason why we have a constitutional requirement for Office of Public Defender is to make sure that all of our citizens are served with a quality service, that they get equal justice under the law. Okay, we're talking about $500,000 here. We're doing all we can to really keep these folks, that, to be clear, have a 24 jurisdiction mandate. It's not like they're just in one county or another. All the counties don't even add funds to the OPDs that serve there. We are the ones who fund them here at this level. I would urge you guys to reject this amendment and stick with the committee. We need the salary raise for these hardworking Marylanders. Thank you.
Maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So what we're really talking about is salary increases. I just looked up very quickly. I hope this number is correct. The average public defender average in Maryland is about $106,000 a year. About $106,000 we need to give them pay increases. That's more than teachers make. That's more than teachers make. That's more than many nurses make. That's more than even some lawyers make, depending upon what you do. That's more than a lot of attorneys in the state's attorney's offices make. $106,000 a year. Not suggesting they don't earn it, but you're casting a vote with your priorities to give people a raise when we're saying we don't have money to give raises for other people. We need money to give raises and to provide financial incentives for teachers, for paraeducators, for other individuals, but we're prioritizing giving raises to individuals who, on average, already make six figures for their job. And I think that this would be an interesting opportunity to see if we could change that. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Majority Whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I don't know where the minority leader got that number, but that's not the wages that our Office of Public Defenders folks are getting. What we're hearing is they're much closer to the 60 to 80 grand range, which is why they're leaving to state's attorney's offices and Office of Attorney General. If they were making that money, I'm sure they would like to stay, right? And I would love to work with you to make sure we can increase their salaries to that level in the future. But that's not the reality that our public defenders are seeing currently.
Move the amendment. Subject to further debate. I mean, we could have the debate about the salary. I'm pulling the information from their databases that suggest that $60,000 may be an entry-level salary, but most district public defenders, the top levels, make far more money than that. And we would move the amendment for consideration by the chamber, Madam Speaker.
Question for the House is question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Roll call.
Madam Speaker,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. The amendment fails.
Madam Speaker.
Yes. Gentlelady from Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk. Amendment number 323-321-1.
amendment number 1.
Move so much to be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
This amendment will take the remaining $2 million that is in the Center for Firearms Prevention and put it back to fund our community colleges that were cut from the budget. That's simply what the amendment does, and I would hope that that would be considered. Our community colleges are extremely important, especially with budgetary considerations for our kids. I know in Carroll County, this will be very detrimental. We have, we talk about the blueprint, we talk about all the things we want to do for workforce development. I know in particular, Carroll Community has a fantastic cybersecurity program, and I would like our children and our families to have this as an option, and I think this will be far better spent for our community colleges. So I press that amendment.
Floor Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Friend, for sharing this amendment and for sharing our joint priority here in the chamber and probably across the General Assembly for funding our community colleges. They are magical institutions. I have a personal connection to one because as a kid, my mom had to go back to school after my father left, and she worked 3 minimum wage jobs in order to get a nursing degree from our local community college, and took us on a totally different trajectory in life as a result. So I'm personally an extreme fan of the important work that our community colleges do as well. I want to share a little bit about where we are, where the amendment proposes to cut $2 million from. So the administration has proposed in our budget $10 million originally for the Center for Firearm Violence and Prevention, Firearm Violence Prevention and Intervention. And the purpose of that center was to create a public health approach to addressing gun violence in our communities. I think it's probably safe to say that for all of us, gun violence is also a shared priority. None of us want to see any firearm violence in any of our communities across the state. And a public health approach is not something we've tried before. We have relied fairly heavily on a carceral response to gun violence. And there is a role for our Judiciary Committee to play when it comes to guns and gun violence. But public health is a really critical missing piece. And let me share where public health approaches have actually saved lives in the past. So a public health approach was similarly used decades ago when vehicular crashes and deaths were at their peak. And the federal government and states took what was known at the time as an all-of-government approach to trying to reduce the number of deaths on our roads. And through that approach, they were able to save 3.5 million lives. We cannot ignore the important role that public health has to play when it comes to violence in our communities. And so while the administration initially requested $10 million for the funding of this center, DLS, our nonpartisan arm, reviewed the budget request and made a recommendation to both the Senate and the House that we should consider funding them at $2 million, given that in the first year it might take them some time to get their work together. But we don't want to wait. We want to make sure that they're able to start that important work now. And so for that reason, while I very, very respectfully respect the importance of transferring more money to the CADE formula and to our community colleges, I want to share that our BRFA actually adds and restores $10 million into our community colleges. So while this $2 million is important, the $10 million investment we make in BRFA will make a much bigger difference in our community colleges across the state. So I hope to see a green vote on the BRFA and urge our body to resist this amendment. Thank you.
Maker of the amendment.
And thank you to my good friend for that explanation. I believe originally 22 million was cut from our community colleges, and we only put, I think, 11 or 12 back. And so I'm sure a lot of you have heard from your community colleges. I know we have heard very much from ours. They are struggling with their budgets already before this happened. And so for that reason, while I understand the explanation and the importance of the public health approach, I just think that at this time, and looking at the budget that we have now and what the projections are, that cutting our community colleges is going to really harm a lot of families and our community colleges. So for that reason, I press the amendment.
Chair of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just on the community college point, I think our public health chair has done a great job defending this initiative and why it needs to stay in the budget, but I think it's important for us to highlight a couple of things that may be missing from the general body on community colleges. First, our community college formula, I believe, is antiquated. And that is why we concluded budget language for the Department of Legislative Services to take another look at our community college formula. The current formula funds what we think of as a traditional community college student. A 2-year, you go get your 2-year and you go get your 4-year. But our community colleges in the last decade have really gone to a multifaceted sort of approach where they're doing, workforce development, programmatic research, certifications that's so important, and they don't actually get funded for that. Delegate, they don't get funded for that. So I think that is going to be really important when you vote for this budget, that you have that language to make sure that they can in the future get funded for that. But I think your amendment highlights a bigger picture here, that we did restore $10 million to our community colleges. This is a big priority for the Budget Committee, a huge priority, but it's fundamentally why we have to stop relying on general funds to support the Transportation Trust Fund, why we can't rely on general funds that support our community colleges to fund the blueprint. If you care about our community colleges, you're going to hear a debate later today. We need revenue in the BRFA, right? That's the biggest thing you can do to support your $2 million is great. $2 million great. But supporting ongoing revenue in the out years to make sure we don't have a community college cuts like this, that's a bigger thing you can do later in the BRFA, and I hope you'll stand with us on that. Thank you.
Maker of the amendment.
I understand the explanation, and I still fully believe, it came in that there was $10 million for this new Center for Firearms Prevention. The Senate cut 6, and the House cut 2. There's 2 left, and I think it's far better spent for the community colleges, and for that reason, I still press my amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Clerk will call the roll. The amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill to its title?
Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady from Frederick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk. It's amendment number 793624-1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Thank you. This amendment puts guardrails on how public funds are collected from all taxpayers may be used to fund abortion services. This amendment would allow public funds to be used for abortions only in cases of rape, incest, severe genetic defect, or serious deformity or abnormality, or to save the physical health or life of the mother. I do have some questions for the floor leader.
Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning, friend.
Good morning. Thank you. And I do have a point to these questions, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
So do you know, and these are questions I actually get a lot when we're having these discussions, and I appreciate you having this discussion with me in the spirit that I talked about yesterday, in a very professional, healthy way. You know that I love having conversations and debate with you about these issues, and I really hope we model that for the rest of the state, because I think people need civil discourse right now.
Yes, ma'am.
So what standards or regulations are facilities or clinics that provide abortion care held to?
One moment, please.
Sure, of course.
The same that all other health facilities in the state are held to.
Okay, so that would be the same as like an ambulatory care center or urgent care, doctor's office, surgical centers?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. And do providers have to be licensed? Because I noticed in the Abortion Care Access Act, the licensing piece was kind of removed and replaced with qualified. So am I correct about that? Because I was not here then. So who determines qualified?
They must be licensed.
So it's
They must be licensed.
so okay, so it's not qualified, it still says license in the legislation?
It says qualified, but qualified includes a license.
Okay, who provides the difference between, because I know who provides medical licenses, I don't know who provides some of the clinicians. We offered it to nurse practitioners, we had a lot of different qualifying licensure. So without it being
the license is provided by the occupation board that regulates their job. So
whomever
if
it
they're a
is.
nurse, the board of nursing.
Okay, all right, thank you. And then is sex trafficking and the abuses that go along with that problem a problem in Maryland right now?
Sex trafficking is a problem across the country.
Okay, and didn't we just pass legislation regarding like trainings and education for awareness?
I believe we did, yes.
Okay, and do you know around the average age of sex trafficking victims? I know, I'm sorry, I'm changing things up
No,
for you.
that's okay. I'm sure it's relevant to this conversation. I do not know that answer, but if you give me a moment, I believe you might have that
I
answer.
do. Well, no, I know. Because I did. I put
Apologize.
legislation in about it. I put
prepared
a
for
bill
the
in.
budget discussion,
Yeah.
and I was not prepared with this
I
question.
understand.
I apologize.
So they're 14 to 17-year-olds, and they're usually girls or women, and a significant portion of them could be on Medicaid. So if they got pregnant, would it be conceivable that they would be forced to have an abortion? And if they were brought to an abortion providers or a women's health center for care or treatment, do we have any legislation that requires abortion care centers or pregnancy centers to have awareness training of sex trafficking and how to help young women that may be in that situation and might be still under the control of the trafficker or their abuser, like we do for if they're under child abuse? We do have provisions where they must have some training about how to handle those situations. Do we have the same trainings required for our pregnancy care centers or our abortion care centers?
So going back to your first question in that lineup, no one in the state of Maryland is forced to have an abortion ever. They are offered the option if that is an option that they wish to take and is medically advised. But there is no one in the state of Maryland that is ever forced into making that decision.
Right, and I certainly hope so, but there are situations where women feel that they are being forced, or they are being forced. If they're being sex trafficked and they are taken to the abortion or the healthcare clinic by the trafficker, they may be coerced into having an abortion if they're not given private counseling, if they're not treated, or like if that care center doesn't understand the signs of trafficking or how to help that victim. And like I said, when I had my hearing, there are actually hand signals that young women are actually being taught to use right now if they are being trafficked. And so providing that education and awareness, and I don't know, for anyone who was at the bill hearing, do you remember what it is?
I believe you're referencing a separate bill that had a hearing on it, and so
right. It goes to an awareness piece. So if we don't require those awareness trainings, then who will? So there was a letter from a constituent that said, and thank you for the answer.
Of course.
Thank you.
That's what we're here for.
There was a constituent that wrote a senator, said, "Please don't force me to pay for abortions against my conscience." Then Senator Biden responded, I agree with you. I will continue to abide by the same principle that has guided me through my 21 years in the Senate. Those of us who are opposed to abortion should not be compelled to pay for them. And up until 2021, the Hyde and Weldon amendments at the federal level respected America's deeply held beliefs, whether they were personal or religious, held them to be respected. And then Senator Biden also ensured that constituent that the government should not tell those with strong convictions against abortion, such as you and I, that we must pay for them. And a 2021 poll did find that 58% of Americans oppose taxpayer dollars being used to fund abortions, including 65% of independents. And colleagues, we need to have these very difficult conversations about the practical impacts of the legislation we pass. We sometimes just see things differently, but there are areas that we can find agreement. And if we continue to fund abortions with Medicaid or taxpayer dollars without certain protections in place, are we truly creating the safest healthcare system for women? Are we actually creating a taxpayer-funded vehicle for an abuser or trafficker to continue to victimize? This is a common sense amendment that reflects the respect we have for taxpayers' deeply held beliefs and pauses the funding until we can put in needed health and safety protections in place. Thank you. Madam Speaker, I move the amendment.
Floor Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, colleague, for our always wonderful, productive conversations on this and many other subjects. I want to go back to the substance of the amendment real quick. So what the amendment seeks to do is to add language back into the budget that would restrict abortion access only for Medicaid patients to a narrow set of circumstances, which is in conflict with current law. So not only that, but it actually goes back to a time where such language did exist in our budget, but it strikes a long-standing provision that would ensure that pregnant women enrolled in Medicaid who are seeking abortion services are able to do so if the pregnancy results in a substantial risk of harm to the mother's mental health. So just on a policy note, it is the long-standing policy of this body and in the state of Maryland that we believe that mental health is health. Moreover, under current law, Medicaid has to provide coverage for abortion care services without restrictions that are inconsistent with the protected rights under Title 20, Subtitle 2 of the Health General article. Well, what does that mean? That sounds like a bunch of legal nonsense, right? So it means that patients and their doctors decide if an abortion is needed. We are legislators. We are not clinicians, save for a couple of us here in this room. We had this discussion last year, and I know that many of us agree that we cannot be in every single clinic setting, nor should we be. It is not up to us to make these difficult, sensitive decisions on behalf of patients across the state. It is up to each of them to do so individually based on their own health needs, including their mental health needs. All of our health decisions belong to each of us. And so for this reason, respectfully, my friend, and all of us in this body, I respectfully urge the body to resist this amendment.
Gentlelady still pushing her amendment?
I will, Madam Speaker, but yes, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that oftentimes with mental health and with mental issues, they do cause that physical parameter as well and the physical manifestation. So if a doctor truly did feel that way, I think they could. So for that reason, I'm going to continue to push the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Oppose? Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Clerk will call the roll. The amendment fails.
Madam Speaker,
Yes.
I have an amendment at the desk. It is amendment number 983928/1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
This amendment moves $3.5 million to the Blueprint for Maryland's Future Fund and also moves $3.5 million to the Maryland Department of Health, Family Health and Chronic Disease Services within the Prevention and Health Promotion Administration for the purpose of providing grants to pregnancy centers. I move the amendment.
Floor Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, colleague, for this amendment. I want to just sort of restate a little bit about what our friend across the aisle shared with us. So what the amendment seeks to do is it takes $3.5 million of mandatory funds for abortion clinic provider training and another $3.5 million of funds to reimburse providers for providing abortion care under Medicaid. What it does, as he referenced, is it shifts funds to the Blueprint and crisis pregnancy centers. Medicaid has covered abortion care in Maryland since 1979. It is settled law in Maryland that we believe that abortion is health care and that poor women deserve the same access to health care as everyone else. Qualified, trained, licensed providers, they're absolutely necessary to the provision of these services. So what the BRFA does, and we'll get to that part of the debate this afternoon shortly, is it adds $40 million to the Blueprint Fund. So while I'm grateful for our colleague here who seeks to add another $3.5 million to this important work, and for recognizing that funding is needed to do so, I would really encourage him and everyone else on the floor to support the BRFA, which certainly provides significantly more resources into the Blueprint Fund. On crisis pregnancy centers, this state has never, ever funded these centers, as they do not offer comprehensive health services to patients in need of care. So respectfully, I urge the body to resist this amendment.
Gentleman still pushing his amendment.
Yes, Madam Speaker. I would ask the body as to whether or not low-income Marylanders also deserve access to pregnancy centers in case they choose to keep their baby. What this amendment does is it somewhat levels the playing field and promotes a fair, more equitable, and balanced approach than the purely one-sided approach that is currently contained within this budget. As we discussed on the House floor a few days ago, the governor announced $15.6 million to improve abortion care access statewide. This amendment would reallocate 1/3 to the Blueprint, 1/3 to pregnancy centers, and allow 1/3 to remain in the program designated by the governor. Monies remain in other categories within the budget for abortion. There's plenty of money available for abortion, including Medicaid, the Abortion Care Access Clinical Training Program, the Maryland Family Planning Program, and even the school-based health centers programs. Nationwide, an estimated 2,700 pregnancy centers provide an estimated $267 million in free services annually to their clients. The services include free pregnancy testing, ultrasounds, STD testing, parenting and counseling support, housing, health care, adoption services, job training, educational assistance, free diapers, car seats, and baby clothing. If Maryland taxpayers are funding all of these abortion programs, certainly a reallocation of a small portion of the funds to assist those who choose life is a reasonable ask, and I press the amendment.
Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I stand to support this amendment from our good friend from Western Maryland. And I'd like to share with you a poll that was done in February, a question that was asked in the statewide Gonzales poll. And it asked people what their opinion was of pregnancy resource centers that do not perform abortions, but instead offer assistance to people during their pregnancy and after the baby is born. Statewide, on this question, you would be surprised to know that 78.2% of the people support pregnancy resource centers. And if you break down the demographics within that, 74% of Democrats, 88% of Republicans, and 76% of unaffiliateds support pregnancy resource centers, which do the great work that we just heard about. And further demographic information shows that 76% of whites and 85% of African Americans also favor pregnancy resource centers. So in the spirit of choice and supporting women who make a choice to keep their baby, I think this small amount of money helping pregnancy resource centers with prenatal care and then postnatal care would be a good investment by the state. Thank you.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed. Third reading. Special order calendar
She's not going to call me.
number 51.
Madam Speaker? Probably too late.
Yes.
I was just trying to get up and have a vote change on one of the amendments. Want me to wait until after this one?
You're up now, so you might as well do it.
Thank you. Yeah, my fingers got confused. So anyway, on amendment number 36, nay. Thank you.
Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 362, Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act of 2024. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the chairman of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would now like to turn to the amendments on the BRFA that have been adopted by the Appropriations Committee. I will introduce the amendments to Senate Bill 362 in groups. After describing the amendments, I will move for each group to be adopted. I ask members to hold any additional amendments till after the committee amendments have been considered and adopted. I would note the amendments to the BRFA implement the committee's action on the budget and work in concert with the budget. Without the BRFA, the budget is not balanced. With your permission, Madam Speaker, let me turn to the BRFA amendments.
Permission granted.
Amendment number 1 makes technical changes. Amendment number 2 strikes a provision that would have eliminated mandates regarding the Native Plants Program. Amendment number 3 modifies a provision to permanently eliminate a mandate for Consumer Protection Division and authorizes the use of special funds instead of making the change for fiscal 25 only. Amendment 4 repeals the School Construction Revolving Loan Fund and authorizes a transfer of that balance to the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. Amendment number 5 restores a provision to expand eligible uses of the Consortium for Community Supports and requires the Community Health Resources Commission to process a certain type of platform. Amendment 6 modifies the provision to prohibit an increase in child support scholarship co-payments and restore a requirement that prohibits a freeze in enrollment without certain notifications. Move amendments 1 through 6.
Question for the House is the adoption of amendments 1 through 6. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? I think the ayes have it. Amendments have been adopted.
Madam Speaker, Amendment 7 returns the Sellinger formula funding change to the provision in the bill as introduced. Amendment 8 strikes a provision that would have reduced the mandate for the Mel Noland Woodland Incentives and Fellowship Fund. Amendment 9 strikes a provision that would have altered the highway user revenue distribution for fiscal 26 and 27. Amendment 10 restores a provision that authorizes Motor Vehicle Administration to eliminate the use of registration stickers and expands the use of proceeds for work zone speed citations. Amendment 11 is technical. Move the adoption of Amendments 7 through 11.
Question for the House is the adoption of amendments 7 through 11. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Amendments have been adopted.
Madam Speaker, Amendment 12 amends the uses of fines related to citations from work zone speed control systems. Amendment 13 modifies provisions related to the Maryland Trauma Physician Services Fund to include distribution of revenue from impaired driving fines and expand authorized use of the fund. Amendment 14 requires corporations to submit combined reporting returns reflecting aggregate tax liability of all members of the combined group beginning in tax year 28. Amendment 15 establishes a transportation network company impact fee on passenger trips. Move the adoption of amendments 12 through 15.
I'd like to separate Amendment 14 for debate in a separate vote. If you want to move 12 through 13 in a packet, we have no objection to that, but we would like 14 for separate debate.
Okay. Question for the House is the adoption of amendments 12 through 13. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. 12 to 13 have been adopted. Go ahead, gentlemen. Minority.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amendment 14, as my friend the Appropriations Committee Chair just indicated, imposes a brand new system and scheme of corporate taxation here in Maryland. And it's called corporate combined reporting. I know many of us, this is something that had been considered by the House, has never been passed into law in recent years in Maryland, and is not the way we do corporate taxes today. One interesting thing about this particular form of corporate combined reporting is this. It is worldwide. Other states that have combined reporting, and to be fair, there's a significant number of states that have it, including many states that would be characterized as red states. I think that all individuals who operate in that corporate tax realm, it sounds so exciting, doesn't it? They will tell you that the differentiation is that Maryland has one of the highest corporate tax rates in the country. It's not the highest. It's one of the highest. It is the highest generally in our region. It's higher than Virginia's. It's higher than Pennsylvania's. It's higher than Delaware's, certainly, and other areas within our mid-Atlantic region, and it makes us less competitive. So while other states have combined reporting, they have other corporate taxation rules and regulations and laws that makes them more palatable for corporations to operate. I want to be very clear. I think we all know this. We have to be honest about it with ourselves, with our constituents. Corporations are not some monolithic evil thing. There are some bad corporate actors, but corporations are by and large the people who employ a tremendous amount of individuals in the United States of America and in the state of Maryland. They're your employer. They're how you pay for your rent. They're how you pay for your car. They're how you pay to save for your kids to go to college. They pay taxes, and when they pay you that salary, you pay your income tax from that to us, and we use that for things like the blueprint and roads and police and fire and all the other things that we vote on in this budget. They come from job creators. It doesn't come from the government. Government comes from those who produce and from those who provide economic value, and then we tax that economic value to provide for the common good. Without them, there is no us. And so an interesting thing about this was a bill or a portion of a bill that was heard in the Ways and Means Committee and has now been incorporated into the BRFA. It has worldwide combined reporting. So everywhere, if you have a company that's based in Singapore and they have a fairly small unit, a fairly small operation in Maryland, maybe they operate out of the World Trade Center in Baltimore and they just have someone who does some fairly small operations for them, but they have to file a Maryland corporate tax return, and it will now require them to file it based upon their worldwide income and a very sort of complex formula to be applied to attribute how much of that income is subject to Maryland taxation. No place else does this. No place else does this. New Hampshire considered it early this year. They rejected it. Maine and New Hampshire, they both did very extensive studies on the concept and said this won't work. State of Minnesota, pretty democratic state. State of Minnesota considered it very seriously last year, rejected it. Their legislature said, we can't do this. This is too much for a variety of reasons upon corporations. And here's the kicker too. We're not sure if it's going to work in actually producing more net revenue. There are academic studies that suggest that this, in fact, the volatility of this, when you're talking about worldwide combined reporting, you may wind up getting less money. So, we have a DLS analysis. We live and die by these things to a certain extent, whether they turn out to be right or wrong. We have a DLS analysis that says this particular provision will generate revenue. Who knows if that's correct? Because there's a lot of other individuals who've studied the issue who've suggested that it may not. Because when you take worldwide combined reporting, let's say that Maryland Company A had a pretty good year in Maryland, maybe had a decent year in the United States, but their European affiliates lost billions. Well, they don't get to accrue those losses to their Maryland corporate tax return. They're filed separately. It's a separate entity. Now they will. Now they'll get to take in not just their foreign profits, but their foreign losses. And I've said this many times. These people are smart. They're far smarter than me. Their corporate accountants, their tax service consultants, their global professionals will figure out a way to say, well, if you impose this system on us, we're going to make sure that our losses from all those foreign companies come in, or foreign subsidiaries or foreign affiliates come into our Maryland tax returns. So when we have a year where the foreign income is up, we're going to have to try to adjust that through our Maryland income or through our domestic U.S., what we call water's edge income. When we have a year where our foreign income, where we can attribute losses, maybe things didn't go so well in our Chinese operation this year, maybe there was a fire in Australia that destroyed our factory. These are things that right now we wouldn't care about. They don't affect us at all. When we adopt this, it will affect us. It will be used by the incredibly sophisticated corporate tax professionals advising these large companies, and they will say, hey, we got a chance to pay no Maryland taxes this year, just attribute something that happened in Japan or in Europe or wherever it may be into our corporate tax filings. And so it's burdensome. Companies don't want it. I know that one of the major companies in this state, Lockheed Martin, based in Montgomery County, has already come forward and said, we don't want this at all. This will have deleterious effects for us and our continuing business in Maryland. We cannot do worldwide combined reporting of the nature of what Lockheed Martin's business is. They also have a constitutional or legal argument, at least, to suggest they're being double taxed, because in the 2017, I forget what it's called, the Tax Cuts Reform Act of 2017, we imputed certain levels of international income, global income, to come back, and for U.S. corporations to have to file that or account for it to a certain extent, not to this extent, but to a certain extent on their federal filings, and we passed that through to Maryland's filings. So their position is, we're going to file suit about this if this should ever be enacted day one, and say that you're essentially taxing my same money twice. You're taxing at the federal level under their provisions and then passing it through to Maryland, and then Maryland's also retaxing it under their own system for combined reporting. I know folks want to achieve revenue. I know corporations are easy targets, even though we've just talked about how the fact they employ so many of your constituents. Without Lockheed Martin, without Under Armour, without some of these large companies that exist, believe me, I live in a place, we'd be begging to have these companies come there. We would bend over backwards, literally, for Lockheed Martin to come and put 1,000 jobs in Allegheny County. And without these companies, without their participation in our economy, we cannot grow. And so, very briefly, but I think systemically, I think I'm in agreement with the gentleman who resides on the second floor of this building, as the governor of the state of Maryland, who has said many times in recent weeks and months that the way that we can get the revenues and the funding long-term that we need for priorities of this legislature, or at least the leadership of this legislature, is to grow the economy. When you grow the pie, you can take the same percentage slice, and the slice is bigger. When you don't grow the economy and you want a bigger slice for government, you have to start carving that slice greater and greater and greater, and eventually you've eaten the whole pie, and there's nothing left over. That's the direction that we go. The goal should be, our common goal, should be to do things which encourage and incentivize private sector job growth, private sector investment growth, make Maryland the best state on the East Coast, the best state in America for biotechnology, for cybersecurity, for advanced manufacturing, for job creation, for investment. When we do that, we will have plenty of money left over to pay for the world-class educational programs. We'll have money left over to do things in the transportation field. This particular taxation scheme, I think, will work contrary to those goals, and as a result, I don't believe that it's the best way to generate revenue for the purposes outlined. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate the minority leader raising these concerns. And I do want to acknowledge that combined reporting was in fact part of a standalone bill introduced in the House, HB 1007, which received a hearing in the Ways and Means Committee and had very robust debate as part of that hearing. The bill was then considered twice by the Revenue Subcommittee before being reported out favorably and being, again, debated in the Appropriations Committee before being included in the BRFA. This measure is before us because we have major problems in our tax system here in Maryland and in our country. 1/3 of the largest businesses in our state are paying nothing in state income taxes. That's from data from our comptroller's office. 3/4 of Fortune 500 companies in the United States have offshored profits to foreign tax havens. That's from the Congressional Research Service. And even our own Department of Legislative Services has pointed out that we are losing out to the tune of $225 million a year by having separate reporting. That's the type of tax system we have now. There's combined reporting, there's separate reporting. Separate reporting says businesses, even affiliated businesses, say a parent company and its subsidiaries, all report separately. Combined reporting says, no, those are actually a unified business. The subsidiaries and the parent company, they're all interdependent on one another. They should file a combined report. 28 other states and the District of Columbia have adopted combined reporting. And as was mentioned, this isn't just blue states. This is deep red conservative states like Alaska, Arizona, Idaho, Kansas, Kentucky, Montana, Nebraska, North Dakota, Texas, Utah, West Virginia, and Wisconsin all have combined reporting. Some of these states have had it for decades, for 30, 40 years. The first state adopted it nearly 100 years ago. Combined reporting has been around in America for a long time. It's an idea that's been well vetted. And in fact, if you look at some of the largest companies, in fact, all of the multi-state corporations that do business in our state, nearly all of them already are subject to combined reporting because of their operations in other states. 108 of the 120 multi-state corporations that do business in Maryland already do combined reporting when they report their taxes in other states. Now, to the point on worldwide combined reporting. It would not be accurate to say that worldwide combined reporting is not happening in America, because it is. There is one other state that mandates worldwide combined reporting. That's Alaska. Now, opponents will say, well, they just mandate that on one industry, the oil and gas sector. However, oil and gas companies in Alaska account for 3/4 of their corporate income revenues to the state. So Alaska's already mandating this on the vast majority of corporations in their state. If we look to other states, 10 states plus DC have mandated combined reporting, but they give companies the choice of which flavor of combined reporting they want to use, whether worldwide or Water's Edge. 10 states already give that. And we have data from the Multi-State Tax Commission that shows that companies actually are electing to do worldwide combined reporting in these states. So we already have hundreds of companies who are doing worldwide combined reporting in America. Moreover, there are 6 states plus DC that mandate Water's Edge combined reporting, plus companies have to report profits to foreign tax havens. So 6 states plus DC. So worldwide combined reporting is already happening. It's already happening in a multitude of states. The alternative, if we don't do worldwide combined reporting, by maintaining separate reporting in Maryland, which we are among a minority of states that is doing at this point, is that our small businesses are losing out. We have a tax system now that disproportionately puts a burden on the small businesses that are based here in Maryland, who are creating jobs here in Maryland, who are deeply invested in their communities, in our communities, and giving back in a multitude of ways. They pay a heavier tax burden. And these big multi-state, multinational corporations, by gaming the system, by legally using these tax loopholes that exist in our code and in the federal tax code, are able to create artificial losses in tax havens to avoid paying taxes on profits that are derived otherwise in other parts of the company. And small businesses don't have that option. Combined reporting is about making sure that multi-state and multinational corporations pay their fair share in taxes. And what we've seen from the multitude of other states that have adopted combined reporting is that this works. It closes these corporate tax loopholes. It makes the tax code fairer, and it brings in more money for the states. Again, states would not stand by combined reporting. A majority of states would not stand by combined reporting if they were losing out on money from it. No state that has adopted combined reporting has ever repealed it. So instead of playing whack-a-mole in terms of trying to close one of these corporate tax loopholes at a time, combined reporting is the holistic, unified approach to addressing these problems, to making our tax code fairer, and to making sure that our state has the money that we need, and that we can actually put the money that we have promised to put into public schools, into public education, through the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, that we have the funds for that. So I would urge the body to stand by the committee's amendment.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Calvert.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thought that was a great recitation of everything that is wrong with the state of Maryland. We used to have a lot of corporate headquarters in the state of Maryland, Fortune 500 companies, and I think we only have one left because the tax policies chased them out. So now we have some branch offices of large corporations in Maryland, and now we're trying to chase them out as well. It's always about how much more money we can squeeze out of those companies. And it's not just corporations. This whole fair share nonsense, this whole socialism nonsense, it's happening to the small businesses as well. Increasingly, they're leaving the state as well. It's not that they don't want to do business here, because they do. They're just, driving across Pennsylvania, relocating there, or Virginia, or elsewhere, or just working remotely from some other location in the rest of the country and doing work in the state of Maryland. And so when you have constant taxation of these companies and they start leaving, you get an increasing share of a decreasing market. That is the definition of failure. And that's exactly what the Ways and Means Committee has been doing since the day I got to this legislature. Because it's always about how much more money we can squeeze out of the citizens of Maryland, and then going after the corporations and saying, well, they're the ones that are at fault. Well, if that were the case, then why are all these other taxes in the same BRFA? Tons of them. Tax bill after tax bill, 250 fees that hit every single Marylander. Stop playing this game where we pit one group against another, and just stop taxing the people once and for all so they can afford to stay here and retire here. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
John Lee from
Thank you, Madam
Baltimore
Speaker.
City.
So I want, first of all, to thank my colleague for her excellent coverage on this matter of combined reporting. I just want to remind the body that the resources here are dedicated to public education. I know many times we discuss the commitments we've made around the blueprint, but I think people forget that general funds have always been dedicated to public schools, and that has not changed since the blueprint. The blueprint has been additive to what we've already committed in our general fund. And what combined reporting will do is ensure that we can have steady funding of public education through the general fund. That also includes funds that can go to capital. I know many of you have schools that are bursting at the seams and some that are falling apart altogether. And so I want you to think about our shared values, no matter what corner of the state we fall from. I'm sure we're all concerned about the quality of the education that our neighbors and our own children receive. And so with combined reporting, this will give us a lot more certainty about ensuring that we have the general fund support, not this year, not next year, but in a continued sustainable fashion to ensure that we're able to keep up not only our personal commitments, but our legal obligations under the state constitution. I know for a fact that many people moved to Maryland because of the historic high quality of our public education. When I first moved to Maryland, we were always ranked in the top 3 as a state. And unfortunately, we have fallen over the past decade. But with the investments we're seeing in the blueprint, we're already seeing some of our most challenged schools see improvements because we made that concerted effort and those investments and prioritized those young people across the state that needed it the most. So I implore you to stand by the work product of the committee as relevant in Amendment 14, because it's about ensuring that we're investing, ensuring that our neighbors and their children will be able to be high quality, not only employees, but employers in the future. And so I say that as a reminder about what the purpose of this BRFA amendment is for. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to briefly respond to some of those points. I agree. We do want to have a high-quality education. Let's be honest. Worldwide combined reporting is not going to generate enough money to pay for the $2.8 billion revenue shortfall predicted in the Blueprint Fund in a couple of years. Not even going to come close. It's not going to scratch the surface. We have to start being honest. If we want to pay for the $2.8 billion shortfall, our economy is either going to have to significantly grow, which is the path that I would like to take, or you're going to have to impose very significant broad-based taxes, income taxes, sales taxes, not just on these companies, but on almost everybody, the middle class up. That's how tax policy works. That's how it's fascinating. I enjoy serving on the Ways and Means Committee because you get to see the DLS estimates and the professional estimates of every tax policy that everyone in this room has considered. They get reduced to a fiscal note. And as I've said, those fiscal notes may not be correct all the time. They're the best efforts they can give you within the time limits they have, the information that they have. But I can tell you that you're not going to pay for a $3 billion shortfall with these types of maneuvers. You'd have to do dozens of them to the point where it would become kind of absurd. I will suggest that my colleague, my truly very good friend from Montgomery County is correct. Alaska does impose worldwide mandatory, that's what we're talking about here, mandatory worldwide combined reporting. They do impose it on the oil and gas industry. When you look into why that is, well, Alaska is very different than us. They are bound, their boundaries are foreign countries. If you want to take the oil or the gas they produce and you want to take it out of Alaska, you got to take it across Canada because they don't touch another part of the United States of America. If you want to sail a ship from Alaska to the next known port, I mean, Sarah Palin really couldn't see it from her house, but they're not very far away from Russia and other places of that nature. They're very unique. Alaska and Alaska's oil economy is very unique, which is why they have this. But when we talk about this state does combined reporting, that state does combined reporting, this state does this, I want you to remember, not a single other state in America has worldwide mandated combined reporting other than the Alaskan oil industry for that very particular reason. Not California. California has billions of dollars in budget shortfalls. I'm sure they want their kids to have a great education too. I'm sure they've got problems with their transportation system, I can only imagine. They're not doing this. New York, huge budgetary shortfalls. They make ours look, childlike by comparison. I'm sure that the denizens of Manhattan would support these kind of things, except they don't. They don't have this. They don't have mandatory combined reporting. And I think that one of the combined worldwide reporting, I think that one of the remarks that was made illustrates the point. There are some states that allow corporations to elect an option. We have combined reporting. You can either file it as Water's Edge, U.S. subsidiaries and affiliates only, or you can choose to file worldwide. And my colleague from Montgomery County said there are companies who are choosing to file worldwide in these optional states, which proves my point. They're getting, the company doesn't come in and say, hey, we had the tax accountants, we had the Big Five, Cooper's, Lybrand, whatever, we had them run the numbers. We'll owe state X $5 million if we do it Water's Edge, and we'll owe them $10 million if we do it worldwide. Let's go ahead and file the worldwide and pay $5 million more than what we're mandated to. Nobody does that. They would lose their jobs for doing that. They would be sued by their shareholders for breach of fiduciary duty for doing that. So what does it prove? If there are option states out there and these large corporations are choosing to file worldwide rather than Water's Edge, that means that the numbers actually reflect they're getting less money for those states. Hey, I figured it out. I'd have to pay you $5 million under one formula, but only $3 million if it's global. I'm filing global. Next year, when it turns out that I could do it the other way, well, I'll file Water's Edge. It proves the point that this is not going to solve the problem at all. And in fact, it may lead to decreasing revenues in some circumstances to do this in a worldwide mandatory fashion. It's a great debate. It's a little nuanced, obviously, but I think at the end of the day, when we say we're the only place in America that's going to do this, mandate worldwide combined reporting, your colleagues all over the state, red states, blue states, the bluest states possible, they're not doing this. Some states have looked at it very hard and have rejected it. That to me suggests that there's a problem here, and that's why we're opposed to it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I rise to support the amendment and the minority party's position on this. But just don't take our word for it. Why don't we take the word of the Augustine Commission, who did this report back in 2016 when they talked about just this subject. They also did this report at a time when the state of Maryland had already suffered a severe, deep recession, and that our tax policy and our regulatory policy needed some amendments, some revision, and some thoughts. And so I'll be brief, but in that year two, they talk about combined reporting, and this is what their conclusion was. For many years, the General Assembly has considered whether to impose combined reporting in Maryland. This debate causes uncertainty and sends a negative message to businesses considering expansion in or relocation to the state. In its effort to reform the corporate income tax and generate additional revenues, combined reporting can create revenue volatility and winners and losers among corporate taxpayers. Combined reporting can also lead to additional litigation from taxpayers and create additional administrative costs for both taxpayers and the state. Recommendation number 5 of this report was do not adopt combined reporting and indicate clearly the intent not to do so. So, Madam Speaker, the minority party is saying, listen to the commission, the Augustine Commission, who was saying we have manufacturers, We have tech companies in all of our districts. We are close to Washington, D.C., where government contractors, multi-state, multi-country contractors do business in Maryland. And if we pass this policy in the BRFA, then we risk doing harm to our state. And the minority leader is right. The question is going to be, are you going to help raise revenue, or are you going to hurt in the same effort? And I believe that not only are you going to hurt in this effort, you're also pointing the arrows at these same companies that you want to stay and grow in our state. I support this, the minority party's position on this.
Gentleman from Western Maryland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could I ask the floor leader a couple questions?
Good morning.
Good morning. So I've been here a few years. Some years we've had BRFA, some years we haven't. Could you help me with my understanding of what the BRFA is supposed to do?
And I'll defer to the Appropriations Committee.
Thank you.
Yeah, the BRFA, Budget Reconciliation Financing Act, is a mechanism used through either revenues or cuts to balance the budget now and in the future.
So it's my understanding it was always meant to balance the current year budget, and then moving forward we would adopt a budget for the...
Current and structural. This addresses structural.
Okay. Has this topic had a hearing this year in committee? I'm not on Ways and Means.
The gentlelady talked about that at the outset of her remarks. It did. Would you like her to repeat it? I'm sure she's happy to.
Yes, combined reporting was heard in a hearing in the Ways and Means Committee this
I
year.
know many times when the minority party offers an amendment, we're often shot down because we're told that this amendment was a bill that's heard in committee. So we're taking a change here where we're going to put an amendment onto another bill that had a hearing, didn't pass apparently in committee, so now we're going to pass it as an amendment to another bill.
No, to clarify, this bill did pass. It did pass the Revenues Committee before it was incorporated into the BRFA by the Appropriations Committee. So this bill was given a favorable report.
So, but it's not being passed out as a bill on its own. It's being passed as part of a BRFA.
Yes, it's common practice for 40 years, at least. I have an Attorney General's opinion from back to 91 that talks about the constitutionality of doing this way back into the 80s. Fairly common practice, Delegate.
Seems somewhat
and I know it hasn't been something we've seen, and we have a lot of new legislators here in the past 6, 7, or 8 years, but certainly has been something we've done year after year.
Just seems somewhat deceptive that it shows up here. Thank you.
No deception at all, Delegate. The Revenue Subcommittee had hearing, voted the bill out of subcommittee. The Appropriations Committee considered the provision, and as has been common practice for generations, put it into a BRFA to make sure our structural balance is addressed.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Oppose? Roll call.
Madam Speaker?
Huh?
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker.
Everybody, I can't hear everybody at one time. Yes,
Madam Speaker, I just want to clarify that we are voting on the committee amendments at this time. Is that correct?
Yes. Thank you. All as it's stated up there on the dais. Yes, but we're on 14. So we did the other ones. Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? Not, clerk will take the call. Okay, the amendment passes. Okay. Chairman?
Move amendment number 15.
Question for the House is for amendment number 15. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Amendment has been adopted. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amendment 16 establishes an account in the Transportation Trust Fund for Transportation Network Company impact fees. and establishes uses of the fee revenue, alters trade-in allowance on fuel source of the purchased vehicle and eliminates the trade-in allowance after July 29, increases the vehicle excise tax and increases vehicle registration fee on all classes, increases the vehicle registration surcharge, alters the distribution of the revenue to increase the amount for Maryland Trauma Physician Services Fund, increases revenues to MSOF, and dedicates a portion of the MSOF revenues to the Shock Trauma Center, establishes a vehicle registration surcharge for electric vehicles, alters certain requirements related to work zone speed control systems, increases the citation amount, and requires certain reporting. It also increases the fine for impaired driving offenses. Move the adoption of Amendment 16.
Question for the House is the adoption of Committee Amendment 16. All in favor signify by saying. Recognize your minority whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to debate this issue, actually. This is the perfect time to do it. It's by itself, so we don't have to pull it out. Just to rehash what the chairman of the committee just said, and I'm going to go through it quickly. So there's 8 parts to the committee's Amendment 16. So Part 1 creates a fund. Part 2 alters trade allowances. Part 3 increases taxes. Part 4 increases fees. Part 5 increases fees. Part 6 increases fees. Part 7 increases fines. Part 8 increases fines. So what I would like to discuss today is Part 2, the innocuous part, altering the trade-in vehicle allowance. That may not seem like a big deal, but let me give you some context. For the average Marylander, the second largest expense in their lives is buying a vehicle. The largest, buying a home. So here's what we're talking about. In Maryland, currently in law, when you purchase a vehicle and you have a trade-in, you are only taxed on the difference between the trade-in and the vehicle purchase. So let me give you some numbers. $20,000 trade-in, that's $1,300 in tax savings. $30,000 trade-in, that's $1,950 in savings. $40,000 trade-in, that's $2,600 in savings. And you're thinking, who cares? The problem is there's 250,000 vehicle purchases a year in Maryland. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. When you compare it to a lease, leases are generally 3-year terms, and every time you turn in your lease vehicle, they treat the vehicle you turned in as a trade-in. So guess what? Those numbers I just said, back in action again. This is a lot of money that's coming out of Marylanders' pockets. And get this bill kicks in, this amendment will kick in July 1st. So let's just say 125,000 families in Maryland are going to immediately lose those thousands of dollars that I just outlined. Now, the committee may argue, but it's okay because we're still keeping the credits for electric vehicles. So let's talk about that. In Maryland, there's 5 million registered vehicles. Guess how many electric ones there are? 81,000. That's 1.5% of the population. So in other words, 98.5% of the population is going to be penalized with this amendment. 98.5% of the population will be penalized. Further point, gas vehicles. If the policy is to move people off of gas to hybrid to electric, gas vehicles, average price, $33,000. Hybrid, average price, $39,000. Electric vehicle, average price, $66,000. The other day we talked about some less expensive vehicles. We'll address those in a minute. The average income in Maryland is $41,000. So here's the math. The least expensive vehicle, hybrid vehicle, around $40,000, EV $66,000, those come with payments of like $800, $1,000 a month. So are we saying that the average hardworking Marylander who's making $41,000 a year is going to go out and buy a $900 a month electric vehicle to get that extra tax credit? They're not. They're not. They're going to stick with what they're stuck with, buying a reasonably affordable gas-powered vehicle, and they're going to eat that credit this year. That's what's going to happen. This year. It's kicking in. The last part, is that when you remove a tax credit, it's no different than a tax increase. It's what it is. Because right now it's law. You get that tax credit. And I'm sure others are going to bring up the fact what that will do to our small businesses. The last part I'm going to say is, look, not everybody wants to drive a Volt, a Bolt, a Leaf, a Nero, or a Kona, or even a Peloton. We need to do the right thing for Marylanders. This is a layup to save hardworking, average income families real money. This is real money. This isn't like a few extra cents on an alcohol tax on your bill. This is thousands of dollars a year, and I think this is a mistake. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to add a few words to what the delegate from Frederick County just said, because there's another component of that that I think should concern all of us. Over the last 5 years, the technology for vehicles has increased greatly, improving the fuel efficiency of those vehicles. If we do this, we're going to slow the process of trade-ins. We're going to slow down how long someone keeps a vehicle. I'll tell you, the vehicle I drive right now, if this was in effect where you lose the credit on your trade-in allowance and you added the new 6.5% tax, that would have added $3,700 to the cost of my vehicle. Definitely going to slow me down from trading in vehicles. And when we trade in that vehicle, we create a new product for a dealer that comes right back into more taxes for Maryland. So let's say we trade in a vehicle for $25,000. The dealer is going to take it, clean it up, put new tires on it. I think the average amount spent on a vehicle traded in before it goes back on the lot is $1,800. So we're helping payroll tax. We're taking a vehicle that's traded in for $20,000, and you know the dealer's going to make money on it, so maybe it's going to come back out at $28,000. So they've actually made the product better, making whole what was given back on a trade-in, but even made more money for the state because now they're taxing an additional $8,000. So we're hurting the state not only in payroll tax, but the parts and everything else that went into enhancing that trade-in. The other thing is when we have this in effect where we get a credit on the trade-in, we're committing Marylanders to go to a Maryland dealer. Because if I went to an out-of-state dealer, I wouldn't have had the benefit. So now, you know, with the internet, the Google machine, we can look on the internet for the best deal that we talk about so often, how we neighbor Maryland, Delaware, or Maryland neighbors Delaware, West Virginia, and we're hop skipping away from these other states. So it's easy to search in these other states and get the best deal. And that's going to hurt our Maryland dealers even further. Then if you take into effect the 6.5% that's proposed in this, we're really hurting the poorest of Maryland families. In 2019, the average price of a new car was about $37,000. In 2023, that average was $49,000. A few years ago, interest rates were minimal, 2.5%, 3%. Now they're 8%, 9%. And why I say we're hurting the poorest of Marylanders, the folks with the better credit scores are eligible for the better financing. So when you purchase a vehicle, you roll all these expenses into the price of the car. The price of the car, the registration fees, the taxes, all gets rolled in and we finance that. And we're adding to those costs. 9% on $33,000 worth of tax or whatever is a lot of money over the life of that loan. And we're not only affecting buying a car, we're affecting leasing a car. When we lease a car, we're paying the sales tax on that vehicle. We're paying the 6.5% sales tax on that vehicle. If you think about it, leasing a vehicle, roughly $100 of that cost now is going to be taxes. So it's affecting everyone. And I really think we need to reconsider what we're doing with this. I think when we look at a fiscal note, we look at one side of it.
we don't take into a calculation the entire equation. That vehicle that's traded in is resold at a higher price, generating more tax. It's creating Maryland jobs. It's creating Maryland sales tax. I ask you to consider, I would ask you to reject this amendment. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Hartford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And to follow up on the comments from the minority whip and the gentleman from the Eastern Shore, so there's another portion in this amendment that stands out to me a little bit, and it's pretty narrowly tailored, but it actually does a lot of things that causes me a lot of pause, and that's the fees to rideshare services. And there are a lot of complexities to what this portion of the amendment does. So first and foremost, it applies a 50% fee to ride shares for EVs. It applies a 75% fee to ride shares that are non-EV. And it attaches those fee increases to CPI. So this creates a ton of concerns for me. So first and foremost, right, a 75-cent fee by itself, a 50-cent fee by itself is not breaking the bank for most folks. We can agree to that. However, it does send, for me, a conflicting message to Marylanders. And I mean that by a couple of things. So first and foremost, attaching it to CPI. We've seen the devastating effect that attaching things to CPI here in the state of Maryland has had on average Marylanders, particularly with the gas tax. There's no need to rehash that. It's very clear to see, and it's hurt a lot of Marylanders' pocketbooks significantly. But two, why do people primarily use ride shares, right? Obviously transportation, and obviously ride sharing is good for the environment. So we want to promote that. Secondly, people use it sometimes to get home safe. On the very rare occasion that I may have a third cocktail in an evening out with my friends, right? I'm going to use a ride share to make sure I get home safe. And I encourage others to do that too. That's a very important piece of this technology that's come out and this service that's service in Maryland, right? So this promotes public safety, right? And not only with DUIs and DWIs, but also with people driving under the influence of marijuana, right? Which we still don't have great technology to suss that out. So this is one of those ways that people can avoid harming themselves and harming others. And obviously, once you're involved in the criminal justice system tied to DUI, you can go down a certain path. And at the same time, within recent days, this body shown its commitment to fighting and trying to prevent people driving under influence by passing the interlock bill just a few days ago. And then within a few days, we're going to swing the other way and penalize folks for using these very important services that are good for the environment, that's good for business, that's good for the economy, that is good for public safety, and that's certainly very concerning. And then the last piece of this that concerns me as well is we've talked about in this very BRFA about things to get folks to pay their fair share, right? We have different interpretations of what that means, but that is generally the intent, to get corporations to pay their fair share. But this also picks winners and losers even down to that level, because if you have an EV, your riders pay less of a fee. But who can afford an EV? Only higher income folks can afford an EV. Yet, lower income folks that drive fossil fuel powered vehicles, that are the vast majority of folks who are providing Uber and Lyft services because they need the money. You know, they're doing it for a living or side hustle, a second or third job just to make ends meet. We're going to disproportionately penalize them just because they can't afford an EV. Listen, I think EVs are very cool. I've been in the Teslas. They are fantastic vehicles. They're very fast. They're very comfortable, a lot of great technology. I would love to be able to afford an EV right now. Just doesn't make sense for me with the current technology. So again, just to recap what this does, I believe it sends a message against all the benefits of ride sharing, that we're willing to add a fee to this. We're punting the responsibility by attaching the fee to CPI, which we've seen the negative effects of that. And we're picking winners and losers by being larger penalties to those who don't have EVs versus have EVs. And of course, with the messaging around public safety and encouraging people not to drink and drive and things of that nature. So even though it's not a large fee, I do believe it sends the wrong message. So with that, I will be opposing this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Anne Arundel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, the balance of power in this chamber is glaringly obviously, so it's understandable that our minority voices are often drowned out, and in those instances where we start to make some poignant and powerful points, that a member of the majority party is charged with standing up and refuting those points and kind of bringing everybody back into the fold. But not today. Today is different. Today, the chairman of the Appropriations Committee made an outstanding argument of why we should remove this amendment. He warned of red flags. Nobody's denying that. He spoke of revenue write-downs recently. He said, we need to make Maryland more business friendly, and I could not agree more. Unfortunately, we're 45th in the nation on individual tax burden, 45th in the nation on business-friendly climate. We're the 5th most outward migrated state in the country. We are the 6th most expensive state in the country to live in. How will making it more expensive for people to get to work by increasing vehicle registration fees going to make us more business friendly? How is it going to make it easier for people to get to work? I also applaud his point that we do have excellence in our hospitals, in our medical system. We have some of the most talented people in the world right here in Maryland. However, not a single one of those hospitals, not a single one of those professionals has not come before us and said, we have a serious labor shortage problem, and it is getting worse because we are driving talented people out of this state day by day. One of the top reasons that people say they don't have a job is because they can't get there. Well, bus can't get them all there. When they get their first vehicle, what do? We pile it on harder and say, we want to make it more expensive for you to get this vehicle. We had a bill earlier this year to charge movers of household goods more money so that we can charge you more as you're exiting our state. Our talented people, we're going to charge you more to leave. Look, I'm not saying we shouldn't have any costs or taxes or fees. The Laffer curve is something us conservatives like to look at. It says that at 0% you don't collect anything, and 100% you don't collect anything, somewhere in the middle. But if you go too far, you start to lose people. You start to actually lose tax revenue. It's not a zero-sum game. You can't just keep raising taxes and fees and think more money is going to come in because it's obvious. The opposite is now starting to happen. We are way on the other side of that curve. I encourage this body to understand who this type of registration fee increase hurts worse. Fortune 500 guy? No. The people that are barely putting food on the table right now. The people struggling because of inflation. Everybody remembers their first car. It's the most exciting time. It's almost part of the American dream. And now we're making it more cost prohibitive for people to get to work, to live that American dream, and piling more fees and costs on top of people. For that reason, I ask to reject this amendment.
Committee Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to go back to my friend from Hartford County. I do have to say the actual fee was adopted in Amendment 15, so you might have accidentally voted for it. I apologize. But Amendment 16 does say how that funding will be used, which is very important. I think we'll hear more about from my colleagues on the Appropriations Committee. I do want to say a TNC fee, a Transportation Network Company fee on ride-hailing services, is not new. About 9 years ago, 10 years ago, the General Assembly passed legislation actually from the Senate President, or the current Senate President, to apply a local fee to transportation network companies in certain jurisdictions. Montgomery has it, Prince George's County, Baltimore City, City of Frederick, Ocean City, City of Brunswick. So that's an existing fee, and this would be on top of that. And the reason is that these ride-hailing vehicles have an impact on the road. They don't just pick you up, drive you somewhere, and then park. They continue to drive around, causing wear and tear on the roads, even between picking up folks who, I guess my colleague who had the third cocktail or whatever the case may be. So there is a direct connection, and this is why a number of states have started to add these statewide fees to help pay for their transportation needs. As always, we are plagiarists in the Maryland General Assembly. We do not conjure up these ideas on our own. We are looking at what other states are doing and trying to find best practices. Similar point on some of the discussion about vehicle registration. The delegate from the District 46 came to the Environment and Transportation Committee with a bill differentiating voter registration, sorry to the subcommittee chair, vehicle registration based on weight. And that's because we know that the heavier the vehicle, the more impact it has on the roads. Actually, back in the 1950s, the highway industry, a group called AASHTO, got together with what's now the Government Accountability Office and came up with the formula, which, like the minority leader, I went to law school to avoid doing math, so I'll let you all just Google it on your own. But essentially, the more weight on each axle of a vehicle, the more wear and tear on the roads. So as the vehicles, and most of us are driving two-axle vehicles, get heavier, that creates more wear and tear on the road. So it makes sense, as a policy matter, that we charge a little bit more for that on a sliding scale. So that's sort of the policy reasons behind both of these proposals. But I think what's really important is not just the policy reasons behind the proposals, but also what we're going to be using this funding for. And again, I defer to my Appropriations Committee colleagues on that front. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Subcommittee Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I would encourage you to support this amendment. I'm going to speak to the vehicle excise tax, which is the portion of this amendment that the Ways and Means Committee handled through the Revenue Subcommittee. We did have quite extensive conversation about this. This was not taken lightly. On the issue of the allowance continuing for EVs and a partial allowance for hybrids, this is not meant to be a prize. This is not a reward. It's an incentive. We heard from the minority whip about how few EVs we have in the total car count of our state. We want to increase that. It's important to our policy goals for climate and emissions reduction that we need to incentivize a shift to electric vehicles. This is meant to be an incentive. It is not a penalty, it's an incentive. We need to continue working on this. And we had careful deliberation about it. It's not indefinite. It sunsets in 5 years because this body will have to take a look at how the market has shifted and whether that incentive is still needed. Now, as I said earlier, I can say with confidence there is not a single member of the Revenue Subcommittee, as we voted on this matter, who took it lightly. We understand the impact of raising taxes. But we understand this is how we fund safe, reliable transportation facilities and services. When our constituents buy cars, they want safe roads and bridges to drive them on. This is how we pay for those roads and bridges. This is how we keep our constituents safe. And this is how we fund highway user revenue to our local governments. We heard loud and clear from the counties that they need revenue to help with their roads. 5 out of every 6 road miles in the state are maintained by our local governments. And this allows us to help them with that funding. I, again, would encourage you to support the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Subcommittee Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to say that our subcommittee on appropriations for transportation and environment, we debated and talked about all of the reasons and all the reasons that we need the revenues that the good delegate from Howard County just mentioned. But we also talked about why we need them. And we have this document that you all probably have in your offices. If I asked you to raise your hand if you've ever opened it, I bet several would raise their hands. But it's the Consolidated Transportation Program. It's a 6-year plan for transportation. It's a bit of an esoteric document, so I think it's really important that we drill down on a few of the really significant cuts that we're talking about. Because when you take your vote on this BRFA, you need to be sure what you're voting on. If we break down just some of the highway projects that are being cut, and you can see in this book, all the tabs, those are just highway projects. That's not bridges, that's not other types of cuts. But on the highway projects, one of the ones that is ready to go is in Carroll County. And in Carroll County, the actual page from the document, if you were to open the book, talks about safety. It talks about the need to reduce the potential for rear-end collisions. It's Maryland Route 32, Sykesville Road, 2nd Street to Main Street. This project is needed not only for safety and for increasing capacity, but to advance economic development opportunities in southeastern Carroll County. This project is ready to go. That's why we need the construction dollars that these revenue proposals will provide. There's another one in Frederick County that's also very, very important. This one is almost ready to go, and it is all about the safety of Route 15, Frederick Freeway, and US 40 Frederick Freeway. If anyone's driven in Frederick, you know how congested that area is. You know how tricky it is to be merging on and off of those highways. And it would provide a third lane through inside widening in each direction along 15. It also provides significant noise mitigation to the residents of Frederick County that live along that area. Very important project for safety. There are 14 of these. I'm going to just tell you about one more, the one that really gets me and gets the Secretary of Transportation and everybody on our committee that heard from the people regarding I-81. I-81 is in Washington County. And in that area, they've had a lot of development with good economic development around warehouses, delivery, Amazon, trucks, and so that road is now 35% truck traffic, 35%. And all of those citizens that live in that area struggle to actually merge onto I-81. And this project will allow them to stop playing the game of chicken with their car and all of the trucks and trying to pull out onto I-81. This project is incredibly important to the area around Washington County, and it is specifically for safety. Those are just some of the highway projects. I'd like to talk about bridges. The state has more than 3,000 bridges, and all of them need to be maintained. All of them need to be on a list of priorities, and what MDOT does is they prioritize them on the ones that are the worst shape, and then they also provide a list of all the ones that need funding. Maybe they're not in the worst shape, but they're going to get there, and without this funding, they can't replace those bridges or maintain some of them. On the top of their list is the Cumberland Viaduct. After that, 2 bridges in Ocean City, the US 50 drawbridge and the Route 90 bridge to Ocean City. Those are significant bridge projects that we do not have the funding for. So I just went over bridges and highways. The last thing I'm going to say is the executive director of BWI Airport had a security item that he requested cut because of the lack of funds in the Transportation Trust Fund. Security at BWI. These are the types of cuts that this revenue that our subcommittee chair Ways and Means explained will help us fund. Madam Chair, I yield.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the gentle lady from Howard County, can she verify on the record that if we pass this massive tax increase, that project in Carroll County, that 15 in Frederick, that widening of 81, that the Cumberland Viaduct, that the Ocean City bridges, they're going to happen? Because I've talked to the Secretary of the Department of Transportation, and I can read pretty well, and what this all adds up to is less than $1 billion that could potentially go to the TTF, according to the DLS estimate, and the TTF has a $3.3 billion shortfall. So I would suggest that if we can put on the record, and we can put it in writing, as we like to say in my profession, that if we do this, we're going to build all those projects, you might get a lot more support, but we don't trust that that's what's actually going to happen. I would suggest this to you. I don't think there's any coincidence whatsoever that the reason we have a $3.3 billion shortfall all of a sudden is because we're $4 billion over budget on the Purple Line mass transit construction. Not $4 billion cost, $4 billion over. If I went out on any other form of any kind of budgeting and said, the biggest thing that I'm spending this year is a cost overcharge for one project of mass transit is about 50% of the TTF is spent on mass transit. So if you bring in an additional $1 billion of TTF revenues by passing all these registration fees and all these new taxes on our citizens, on our consumers, are you going to spend half of it on mass transit? Because that's what the TTF roughly does now. So if you spend half of it on mass transit, you're not getting enough money to fill the gap. It's not going to happen. We play this game of saying, you want projects. I do. I want the Cumberland Viaduct to be built because the people where I live pay taxes just like the people where you live. They don't have a fancy mass transit system. They don't have $4 billion in cost overruns. They don't have any of that. The people who live in Frederick, people who live in I-81, which is one of the most dangerous places you can drive probably in this state, as the gentle lady pointed out, they pay their taxes too. They pay their vehicle registration. They pay their gas taxes. They pay every tax that everyone pays in the counties that surround Washington and Baltimore. And what do they get for it? We have to beg and plead and cry and have people die to get you to take seriously widening the road. And the first cuts that come, that one. It's not the Purple Line. That's not getting cut. We're already too far down the road with that. We're going to spend $4 billion more than what we voted to spend. But we're going to say if we don't raise our taxes, we can't widen your roads. We can't have safety for you. That's not right. That's not right. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Chairman of Appropriations.
Was there a
Madam
question?
Speaker, I think the minority leader is about to be a really happy delegate because let me tell you what. The revenue we're talking about here, if you look at the scoring from the Department of Legislative Services and the bonding amount, it's $900 million and it rises to $1.3 billion. Okay? What the Secretary of the Maryland Department of Transportation has said in paper to the Washington Post is that this money will restore the cuts. Will restore the cuts that were made to the CTP. And gentlemen, what were the cuts to the CTP? It was the road projects that the Gentle Lady Subcommittee Chair just read to you. So what will MDOT do? We can't tell the future. They have to do their work. But will this provide the funding and the resources that MDOT needs to restore those road and bridge projects? Yes. Will this provide the funding for MDOT to restore the highway user cuts? Yes. Will this restore the funding for MDOT to restore the cuts to our local buses? Absolutely. Will this provide funding for the next phase of big important projects like Red Line? Yes. This provides the funding. So I look forward to your yes and green vote on this important amendment, Mr. Minority Leader. Thank you.
All right. Gentleman from Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, this is quite an amendment. We've had conversations now on trade-in allowance, excise tax, roads, registration fees. I think one thing is important to mention here that I see included in here, and that's the vehicle registration surcharge. And I really want to applaud the Senate Budget and Tax Committee and the House Appropriations for their commitment to shock trauma and the trauma centers across the state. It was last year that Tidal Health, that's would service my constituents, raised a flag concerned about their lack of funding and the deficit that they had. And you always hear us talk about the difference in rural versus the expense of rural living, or the differences in rural. And I've got to tell you, rural trauma is a lot more expensive than, say, shock trauma in Baltimore City. And the reason why I say that is, with the lower population, we have fewer people coming through, fortunately. And the standby cost for running a rural or a regional trauma center is huge. I understand that we have a $20 million cost for standby and on-call trauma care. And I also understand that in the bill is the potential of $2 or $3 more million to Title Health for uncompensated care. And as I said in the beginning, I truly appreciate the commitment to trauma care. We need to preserve it. And maybe next year we can have another conversation about that $2 or $3 million potential for uncompensated care to help cover that huge cost that we have for the standby and on-call care. But again, my thanks to both Senate and House for their commitment to trauma care. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to clarify. I thought the gentleman had said that some of this money is going to go to fund the red line. Am I correct?
I did not say that. What I said is that there is funding there should the Department of Transportation choose to use it to fund the next stage of Red Line. We don't control the Maryland Department of Transportation. All we can do is provide the funding. They have to do their work. They have to make prioritizations. They have to do their due diligence. But the funding is there, yes.
Okay, so you're saying they allocated funding to move on with that project, to do engineering and studies and right-of-ways and everything?
Not what I said. The funding is there should they go to the next phase. Now, last year, the Maryland General Assembly actually funded about $100 million to do some planning and design. This would do planning, design, and get us right up to where we need to be on construction. Should that be a priority for the Maryland Department of Transportation? I believe it will be, because the governor has made it a priority, but we don't control and we don't get granular in controlling what they do on certain road and transit projects, but we do need to provide the funding.
Right. Well, I was listening to this, and I've actually attended several of the meetings for the Red Line. Most people that I've talked to do not want it. I'm just being fair and being honest. One of the things that really is dumbfounded me that we're doubling down. I mean, with the Purple Line, how much money the overages was spent for that. Now here we're going to go ahead and fund the Red Line, which is not wanted, especially in my district. Thank you.
Chairman of
I guess let me just conclude. I know that there's concern about what will be funded and will not be funded. I think it's important, the Secretary's comments to the Washington Post. I also think it's important for the General Assembly and this body, as you look at this amendment, to consider the last page of the BRFA, page 96, which really does sort of put our intent in that we intend that highway user to local governments in accordance with Title VIII be restored, that locally operated transit systems be awarded, that Maryland Transit Administration operating funds be restored, and the highway projects that we've discussed here be restored. And finally, the final sentence, continue planning and developing for the Maryland's future transportation needs, including Red Line and other significant capital projects. So while they have to make the final decision, I think it's important that this General Assembly be heard, that that is what we intend this funding to go toward.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Eastern Shore.
Thank you. So, body, last session, last year, I introduced legislation that passed to create a commission on trauma funding. And I want to give my hats off to my friend from Montgomery County who was our representative on that commission. And I think they did an outstanding job. We do have a world-class trauma system here in the state of Maryland, but I did learn last year that it was woefully unfunded in some areas. So there are some parts about this amendment where I do see that we are raising a surcharge on vehicle registrations, and that is how the Physicians Fund has traditionally been funded. We're also adding an additional fine for driving impaired, which results into automobile accidents. I am very comforted to know that if I am on my bike riding in a Peloton and I do an Idaho stop and I get hit by a distracted driver, then I'm going to end up in an awesome place that's going to take care of me and bring me back. I wish that these components of the trauma were separate. I know the great delegate had introduced it as a House Bill 1439, and if it had been separate, I would be standing here proudly to support the Trauma Center funding. Thank you.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Oppose? Roll call.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Is there more coming out? Okay. Have you two voted? You have, okay. Clerk will take the call. The amendment passes. Committee chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. One more amendment to go. Amendment 17 includes a technical amendment, repeals the Train Commission, expresses the aforementioned intent language about the use of increased transportation revenues, and specifies the timing of the trade-in allowance provision. Move the amendment.
The minority leader.
I just had a brief question. What I heard my friend say, did you say repeal the Train Commission? So the commission that was established last year to consider how we're going to do financing and funding for all of the transportation initiatives. This amendment and this BRFA would just eliminate that, I think, 1 year before they were scheduled to end?
Yeah, we don't think we need two solutions. We think we have a solution, and I think it's satisfactory.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Is there any further debate? On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. The amendment has been adopted. Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report, committee report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The amendments have been adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Recognizing the gentleman from St. Mary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk. Amendment number 823427/1.
Amendment number 1.
So be considered reading an amendment.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I really enjoyed the last debate on cutting transportation projects because we've cut a lot of transportation projects. But it's important to understand why those projects were cut. And those projects were cut because we elected to fund mass transit instead of transportation. You can only describe it as a war on drivers. That's what we have in this budget right here, which is the largest tax increase in Maryland state history. Maryland has the 5th highest gas tax in the nation. And this July 1st, guess what? The gas tax is going up again. At that point, Marylanders will pay 70 cents a gallon in state and federal tax. That is a lot of money. And you look at this bill, it raises taxes on other drivers, it eliminates the trade-in allowance, increases the vehicle excise tax, increases registration fees, increases the penalty for speed cameras, assigns an impact fee for Uber and Lyft. It raises a lot of taxes. And it's supposed to be because the Transportation Trust Fund is in trouble. What this amendment does is put the fare box recovery back to the historic standard of 35%. And look, because minority party and myself are such kind people, we phase it in over 5 years to get back to where we were in 2018. Now, why would we do this? Because if you look, the fare box recovery for mass transit right now is in single digits. Let me give you an example. WMATA has a 6% fare box recovery. That means the taxpayers are subsidizing it at 94%. So while we're raising taxes, canceling transportation projects, the young lady from Howard County read off a whole bunch of them, and I have a list here myself that I think we'll get to eventually. Why are we choosing to cancel transportation projects instead funding mass transit? This corrects all the problems that the House Appropriation Committee talked about revenue. Earlier in the debate, we talked about, hey, we need to do more funding for the BRFA. Well, this does it. This amendment here does that. So with that, I'm really hoping for a friendly amendment. So I'll let the floor leader take it over from here. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you to the good delegate from St. Mary's County. And we have to remind the body that we provide transportation options for all areas of the state. And in urban areas, that's transit. In rural areas, that's highways. And there's a good mix of everything in between. Members, I ask you to reject this amendment, and the reason is that the legislature used to have a 35% fare box recovery for MTA, but the legislature, this body, chose to repeal it in 2017. Our fare box recovery across all modes for MTA is about average right now compared to our peers. We are above our peers in some cases, in some modes, and we're below our peers in others, but generally we are average. Ridership is going in the right direction. In fiscal year 23, ridership increased 15% from the prior year, and increasing fares, as this amendment would force MTA to do, simply drives away the riders that have a choice and makes the riders that are left, who can least afford it, pay the increase in fares. We believe that this amendment simply doesn't work, and therefore we ask you to vote against it.
Maker of the...
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Friends, let's put some numbers behind this. This bill up here, in the preceding budget that we voted on, has $639 million for WMATA, Washington Area Metro. We only have $599 million in state dollars for roads and bridges. Those numbers seem to be a little upside down, wouldn't you think? Because, as I said when I offered the amendment, we have motorists paying a ton of money. And look, these projects are deep. We talked about some of them before. In my area, Route 249 was cut. The road floods out, traps the citizens in that area of a peninsula. The road needs to be raised, but you know that project was cut by MDOT. Also in St. Mary's County, $15 million for Route 5 and Great Mills Road. That was a campaign promise for like the last 2 elections, but it's cut. Then you go around the state. Allegheny lost $7 million from US 220. Anne Arundel, $38.6 million from I-97. Baltimore, $33.9 million from I-795. You can go on and on. Frederick, $105 million from US 15. Montgomery County, $68 million from I-95. The list just goes on and on. These are transportation projects that benefit the overwhelming majority of our citizens. There was a recent poll a couple weeks during session, Patrick Gonzalez poll, that said 64% of Marylanders want transportation money spent on what it was collected for, which is roads and bridges. I would ask the floor leader exactly how many people ride mass transit in this state. Because right now we're catering to the top 10% at the sacrifice of every other citizen in this state. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The revenue that flows into the Transportation Trust Fund is for all of our modes of transportation. And we choose to provide transit as a public good to move people efficiently, contribute to economic development, and please don't forget that point. Large employers, chambers of commerce support transit because it gets their employers to their places of work. We choose to put our values in transportation systems in urban areas and also in rural areas. We can do both. They are not mutually exclusive. Members, I ask you to reject this amendment.
Last comment, Madam Speaker.
Maker of the amendment.
Thanks, and we'll conclude this debate. $639 million just for WMATA. More money than state dollars going in for roads and bridges. That's insane. That's not what people in the state want. And it's not fair for some people to be getting almost a free ride while other people are having, commuters driving to work. I mean, they are struggling. And we're raising record amounts of fees and balancing the budget and trying to pay for Kerwin, the blueprint, on the backs of commuters going to work, while at the same time we're letting some people that take a better value, more morals, I guess. They ride the metro so they don't have to pay for their commute to work. I don't see how in the world that is fair. We use the word all the time in this chamber of equity. Some of us say the words, but I'm not really sure we know what those words mean or believe. Because right now, I tell you, if you're a motorist in the state of Maryland, you're taking a beating. I move the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill as to its title? Gentleman from Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk. Amendment number 613625-1.
Amendment number 1.
Thank you. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So this amendment requires that any state fee or toll or rate of state tax that automatically increases whenever the consumer price index goes up shall also be adjusted downward to reflect any decrease in the CPI. As much as I might oppose it, linking revenue sources to be automatically increased with the CPI is a public policy that was made by this General Assembly years ago. And with this amendment, I'm not even trying to get rid of that. This amendment is about equity and fairness when it comes to various fees, taxes, and tolls across our state government. Maryland's policy of indexing fees and taxes to the CPI is currently a one-way street, and it only goes up. Should the CPI decrease in the future, I'm hoping that the tax or fee linked to it, that it would be reduced accordingly, and quite frankly, it should. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Chair of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my friend from Carroll County, who I know has great knowledge in this area personally and professionally. And I appreciate the point. Inflation has hit Marylanders hard. It's hit everybody in this country hard. It's hit the world hard. And, whatever you think it was caused by, and I know there's different opinions depending on which cable news channel you watch, It's been a real challenge. And I appreciate that the gentleman recognizes we've made a public policy decision to tie to the CPI certain things. And I'm glad he's not attempting to repeal that. I do want to clarify for the body what we apply those to. We've previously applied it to the motor fuel tax. One component of the motor fuel tax is tied to CPI inflation with an 8% collar. In this bill, we also apply it to the TNC fee, as my friend from Harford County pointed out. The TNC fee is the ride-hail fee. And we also apply it to another fee that I think a lot of my friends in the minority party are going to like. We haven't talked about it, but this BRFA adds a fee on zero-emission vehicles, a sliding scale depending on if it's a hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or full zero-emission of $75 to $125 a year, and we link that to inflation. On the first piece, which is obviously the largest at this point, the motor fuel tax, although there's a CPI component, there's another component that actually does already do part of what my colleague from Carroll County is referencing, because the motor fuel tax is made up of three components. There's a base number, there's a CPI applied to that base number, and then there's another component, which is a percentage of the prior year's real-world gas taxes when you remove state and federal taxes, or excuse me, gas prices when you remove state and federal taxes. And so if gas prices go down, which it's hard to remember a time, but there was a time when gas prices went down, that actually would have a downward effect on our state transportation revenue. But the reason we don't want to apply that policy more broadly, as my friend from Carroll County knows, is that our transportation budgeting needs a little bit more certainty going forward. And so we've had very few periods of deflation in the last 60 years. We've had two brief periods. And to have an immediate drop to our transportation revenue during those two brief periods is problematic. And part of the reason it's problematic is because so much of our transportation revenue actually goes to people. It goes to personnel. If you look at the state highway budget, about 46% of it is for personnel, and another 36% is for contractual services, a lot of which is personnel. When we have a moment of deflation, like we did, let's say, in 2009 with the Great Recession, do we immediately want to cut the pay of the people working at the state highway because we immediately cut the revenue? I don't think that approach makes sense. Now, if there's a longer-term issue, if we were to go back through a panic of 1837 type of scenario where we had longer-term deflation, then I think the General Assembly can act, and we've actually shown the ability to do that. I think it was 2 years ago. We did make a temporary change to the CPI because that particular situation warranted it, but it didn't make sense to do it as a broader matter of policy. Now, I also want to note, and again, I appreciate the gentleman from Carroll County acknowledging the existence of the CPI policy and that it was a choice that was made before most of us were here back in 2013. We were actually on the vanguard of saying we want a variable motor fuel tax, but now it's very common. 20-something states are doing it. So I took a look at a few of them to see how do they deal with this issue of can it go down depending on the situation. So I looked at the variable tax rates of those radical majority party states of Arkansas, Utah, and West Virginia, all of which have variable rates for their motor fuel tax like we do, and none of which have the policy the gentleman from Carroll County is proposing. I guess we don't have a lot in common with Arkansas, Utah, and West Virginia except responsible budgeting for our transportation investments. So with that, I would ask the body to resist the amendment.
Maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, Floor Leader. Appreciate it. I think this is a reasonable amendment for our citizens who have withstood these increases during and currently in the aftermath of the global pandemic. And quite frankly, our economy is still trying to come back. And hopefully we'll get to a point where inflation does slow down and that our citizens will potentially automatically be able to be afforded some tax and fee relief. In short, what goes up must come down. So with that, I move the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? No. Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill to its title? Gentleman from St. Mary's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk. The number is 873323.
Amendment number 1.
Thank you. Please be considered the reading amendment.
So ordered.
Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, this is the last amendment. So it's a good reason to say yay. So basically, what I'm asking for here is the chairman said 2.5 hours ago. He stated to us that, I'll find my notes here, he said here, we preserve money for program open space. So the amendment basically just seeks to say that the $6.7 million, plus or minus, that is being taken from program open space and moved to expenses, personal expenses undefined per se, be restored to program open space. Now we've sat here and listened for a number of weeks about bicycle trails, preservation of parks, land acquisition for communities. And quite frankly, I don't think anybody in this room does not have a constituency or themselves that doesn't use program open space. So the simple amendment simply sits there and says, please preserve the money for program open space and don't reallocate it to what I will refer to as personal expenses. Pure, simple, 12:55, we can go home for lunch. Thank you.
Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, delegate from St. Mary's and Calvert. And to be honest, we do feel the pain on this one, and we understand why you would make this amendment. And we struggled in our subcommittee with this particular cut, which, by the way, was recommended by the nonpartisan Department of Legislative Services. The reason we need this cut is that the transfer tax revenues, part of which support the park system, did not meet projections in 2024, and then we had to decrease the revenue projection for 2025. And what the Department of Natural Resources was doing was keeping positions open so that they could try to make up for some of this lost revenue. The program Open Space has $172 million in the fund, and about $50 million would be left that is not spoken for. So because they still had 50 million or so, maybe it's 49, I can't remember exactly, we felt the 6.7 million was reasonable, as the Department of Legislative Services suggested, to go to the Park Service to help them fill those positions, because we need extra land, but we also need to maintain it and keep the people in the Park Service working to provide the best parks for Marylanders. One last point, though. We do have a possible potential solution for next year, which I hope that you will be able to support, and that is that the Department of Natural Resources has not really taken a good look at their fees in a long time, and a lot of their fees do not reach the level of paying for what the fee is supposed to pay for. And so some of those fees will be revised, and they will be able to get more income in and hopefully support the operations of the park system and hopefully not use another transfer like this in the future.
Thank you very much. Can I speak? Okay.
Yes, that's you.
Thank you very much for the explanation. Again, the magic word fees popped up, and I'll pay attention to that one too. But like I said, I have a hard time going back to my constituents to say, was a 12% cut in program open space when we're looking for trails and land acquisitions and parks and things like that many of you have too. So, ma'am, I move the amendment, please.
Floor leader.
My math says 3% cut in program open space. I ask you to reject this amendment.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Oppose? Roll call.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? So the clerk will take the call. The amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered finally for third reading. Thank you, appropriations and everything else. John Lady from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a member of the Appropriations Committee, I want to make sure that I am recorded in the green on amendment number 14, please.
Okay. So you got the word, huh? All right. That ends the work at the desk. Committee announcements, appropriations.
We have bill hearings, Madam Speaker. We will pick up at 2 o'clock.
Okay.
Thank you.
Judiciary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you, Madam Speaker.
Oh, you're welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House Judiciary Committee will not be meeting today.
Environment and Transportation.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The House Environment and Transportation Committee will have bill hearings at 1:30, and please keep an ear out for subcommittee meetings.
Ways and Means.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Ways and Means Committee will meet at 1:30 for bill hearings.
Economic Matters.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Economic Matters will not be meeting today.
Health and Government Operations.
No such luck. The Health and Government Operations Committee will meet at 2 p.m. today for hearings.
Are there any subcommittee announcements? Okay. Any delegation announcements? Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to remind the Baltimore County delegation of a very important meeting at 4 o'clock today. If you want to come early to study, that you're welcome to.
Okay. Any other delegations? Okay. Any caucus announcements?
Jewish.
Huh?
Jewish caucus.
Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland will meet tomorrow virtually at 8:30 a.m. See everyone then. Thank you.
Jewish Caucus.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is my pleasure to extend an invitation to everyone in this body, as well as your staff, to join the Jewish Caucus tomorrow morning at 8:45 in the Cade Room over in the Senate Office Building. We will be having a wonderful celebration of the holiday of Purim, which is coming up this weekend. Goes back to the Book of Esther, where the Jews were able to outsmart the Emperor of Persia and survive. And we have a wonderful celebration, and we will be having homemade Hamantash from the Sunflower Bakery in Montgomery County, which is a wonderful institution. So I would invite, again, everybody in this body, as well as your staff, to stop by tomorrow, have a nice nosh with us, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning at 8:45. Thank you.
Okay. Any others? Nope. Do we do donations? Yep. All right. Women's History Moment. Good delegate from representing Montgomery County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good afternoon, colleagues. For today's Women's History Month moment, I'm highlighting a woman who served in this body and in the Senate for a total of 37 years. Jenny Forehand was one of my predecessors who represented Rockville and Gaithersburg in Montgomery County. Jenny was not a native Marylander, but she deeply loved her chosen home. She, her husband, and their 2 children established strong ties to Rockville where they lived. Jenny Forehand was born as Jenny Meter in Tennessee in 1935. She was a college graduate and worked as a teacher, as a juvenile court probation counselor, and as a statistician, as well as started her own business. When Jenny Forehand was first appointed to the House in 1978, she was one of just 23 women. Her appointment, in fact, occurred just 6 years after the Ladies' Restroom Committee was established, a group that ultimately became the Women's Caucus. Throughout her legislative career, Delegate and then Senator Forehand took the lead on many issues that we as a body still find important today, including domestic violence, human trafficking, family leave, child support, daycare access, reproductive freedom, and greater representation of women in government. She was also a trailblazer in the fight for smoking cessation in Maryland. For instance, she was responsible for making Orioles Park smoke-free. But she wasn't just content to make gains through legislation. Jenny personally took action to end smoking in the Maryland General Assembly by hiding the ashtrays that sat on members' desks at the time. She did that not, in fact, just once, but twice. And in fact, state troopers were sent to her office to try to locate those ashtrays. But I've been told by one of her longtime aides that the hiding place of those ashtrays remains a secret to this day. Sadly, former Senator Forehand passed away a few months ago, but she will long be remembered for her gentle Southern drawl, tenacious passion for what is right, and effectiveness as a policymaker working for the people of our state.
Madam Speaker.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Joint Committee on Legislative Ethics will be meeting tomorrow morning at 8:45 in the old Anne Arundel County Delegation Room, also known as Room 142. Thank you.
Any other personal or guest announcement? Speaker Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Permission to use delegates' names?
Permission granted.
Thank you. Delegate Love, Delegate Ivy, and I represent the House on the Chesapeake Bay Commission. We work with our peers from the legislatures of Virginia and Pennsylvania to advocate policy and legislation that address the issues facing the Chesapeake Bay. Today, everyone will receive a copy of the Commission's 2023 annual report. The report highlights our progress at the federal and state levels to adopt legislation needed to advance Bay restoration. We hope that you find this report of value, and we thank you for continuing your support to address the challenges and opportunities of Bay restoration. Thank you.
All righty. Young lady from Prince George's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And so, colleagues, for the last time this year, I will remind you that this evening we will be celebrating the Speaker Society dinner. You were here to see the awardees this morning. And so if you have not already done so, you are still welcome to attend by seeing Ms. Rhonda Caldwell Dove downstairs in room H4. And I look forward to seeing all of you this evening in the House Rotunda at 5 p.m.
Okay.
Madam Speaker.
Young lady from Montgomery.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I'd like to ask all of you to join me in welcoming the Black Officers Association Incorporated of the Maryland Natural Resources Police.
Okay. Gentlelady from Howard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, we are joined today. I have a student who's shadowing me from Annapolis High School, Mr. Reggie Dean. Reggie is captain of the Annapolis High School basketball team. He's a multi-sport athlete, also participating on the school's football team and track team. He's a member of the Interact Club and the Change Engineering Club at Annapolis High School and is a native Annapolitan. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Dean in our gallery. Thank you.
Gentleman from Anne Arundel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to change my vote. Amendment 316, SB 362, recorded in the red. Thank you.
Okay. Gentleman from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's important to note that we have one of our own in the rear gallery. Lisa Bell Castro is with us today.
Gentlelady from Howard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have two things, if I could, please. First, wanted to share that a classroom from Talbot Springs Elementary School was here earlier today. They were in the gallery for quite some time listening to the debate, particularly when it was regarding taxes and education. So I hope they had a great day with us. I'm also pleased, along with my District 13 colleagues, to welcome the Doctor of the Day, Dr. Marie Alberte Boscu, who is an internist with Crossroads Medical Group, and that is in District 13. Please join me in welcoming her.
Any other personal or guest announcement? Before I give you quorum call, I just wanted to say at the end, we're going back and forth, but it was good, serious debate today, and for that I thank you. Very interesting, going back and forth. So, and I think we were respectful of our sides, so we didn't attack each other. So that's a good thing. With that, quorum call.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their presence? Clerk will call the roll. There being 126 members present, the House is still in session. Recognizing the majority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House stands adjourned until Thursday, March 21 at 10 a.m. Legislative date, March 13.